And welcome to the Dank Christian Memes podcast. My name is Broclen. I am the digital minister and a moderator for Dank Christian Memes, as well as your intrepid host for our various podcast endeavors. I'm joined today by Castor Troy, our guest of honor. Troy, would you like to introduce yourself a little bit?
Absolutely, sure. I just want to make sure it's my sound coming through okay. How do I sound on your end?
Sounds pretty good to me.
Boom. So I like to hear. Hey, Castor Troy here. Just coming in and accepting the invite from my buddy Broclen and just being able to talk about, as you can see, some fandoms as the hot topic of the day. Just glad to be here. Thanks for having me around.
Now, I know you, obviously. So
Yes.
let's give you a title here, just so other people know. Would you call yourself a media critic, a cinema critic? What sort of title do you think would come closest to identifying you?
I would say an overall media or pop culture critic. Yeah, that actually fits. That fits right now. Since I'm not actively working on anything, I don't say, oh, I'm a columnist or I'm a journalist. I'm just a pop culture critic at the moment, and just a guy who fully immerses himself in these sorts of things because that's how his brain works and can just kind of dig in and go through history, trends, traits, just what the patterns that we've seen over decades and decades of just consuming popular culture and media. And just, I like to talk about those things.
And that's great, and that's exactly why we asked you to be here. I think something for me, I kind of watch various fandoms as they appear on Reddit, and whether or not Reddit is a good sample size or not, I don't know. So I look forward to sort of comparing what I see on some of the fandom subs on Reddit to what your more acute observations have seen.
Okay. I will say Reddit is a very interesting microcosm, and I'm sure we'll dip into it, but it's very similar to, it's like, oh, we have a bunch of, I don't want to say like-minded, but a bunch of people that are willing to engage in one specific place, then talking about something and seeing how that conversation might be different from conversations you see or hear in the wild, as I like to put it. So yeah, that'll be a big part of this conversation, I'm assuming.
Yeah, we can compare some notes on that. Next, I'm going to point to Jones in the cut. Jones, how should we think of you? What's your point of view on fandoms?
Hello, friends. Can you hear me?
Yeah, sounds good.
Loud and clear.
Okay. Fandoms. I don't know. I deep dive into stuff. I'm part of some fandoms. Maybe I do a little more long-term fandoms. I was like kind of really into anime fandom for a while, and wrestling has been, like a decade stepping back into. I think if anything, wrestling might be only thing that I feel pretty immersed in to the point of fandom. So I don't know if I have a title. Do I need a title?
Well, and wrestling is definitely an interesting creature when we talk about fandom. So I'm glad we can cover that subject a little bit. Mm-hmm. Nun Tribe, do you want to introduce yourself and talk about your interest or lack thereof in media fandoms and so forth?
Hi, everybody. Good afternoon, wherever you are around the world. Coming in from the mountains region. I'm in Denver. Anywho, I guess as I think about fandoms, and I was kind of thinking about this when you had the subject, and I was like, where do I fit in this? I'm kind of in that weird. I'm almost 40. But not quite there. So I don't know if I'm old or young. Just guess it depends on who you're talking to. But I guess my fandom.
Power to you, brother.
Right. Kind of where I fit into this stuff normally tends to be kind of around things that sort of predate social media in a sense. So, and really for me, it's honestly just like TV shows, right? Like a lot of different animated TV shows that I find myself following those Reddit threads and watching those shows and kind of engaging in the discussions on Reddit, as someone mentioned earlier. So I think that's kind of where I tend to fall. So, you'll probably find me over at Dunder Mifflin threads sometimes.
My wife had to tell me that is not Dunder Muffin. So I say Dunder Muffin sometimes. She's watched the show. I have not.
Yeah, so things like that, Parks and Rec. I've even turned some of my kids even kind of and followed me into some of those things. So that's kind of where my stuff tends to be. It's probably not as immersive as I think some folks who are probably into more deeper fandoms, in the sense of like, going to Comic-Con and all that kind of stuff. But that's kind of where I stand from in this particular area. But really interested to have the discussion and learn some more and maybe impart some thoughts.
Cool. Good to have you here from the start this time. Crew Angel, you want to introduce yourself? Oh my God, he disappeared as soon as I said his name. What have I done? Well, I guess perhaps he'll introduce himself when he returns to the land of the living. So, Castor Troy, I'm going to start with a question, and then I'm going to answer my own question, and then you're going to tell me why my answer is potentially wrong. Does that sound good to you?
Ooh, that sounds like a fun game. Yeah, let's do that.
That sounds awesome.
Okay, so the question is, what is the first modern fandom? And I'm going to go ahead and give very little thought to it and say, well, probably the Star Trek and the Star Wars fandoms. Would you like to prove me wrong?
I will not like to prove you wrong, if only that I agree, but only if where are we counting modern? Like, what is your cutoff for what you're considering modern? Because I want to agree if we're like, yep, pretty much in that wheelhouse of like maybe 50s, 60s, 70s as we interpret fandom, I would say that you're right. But is that what we're calling modern right there? That's our cutoff?
I guess I'm calling it modern because it's focused around, semi-modern cinema. It's also something that you can see in physicality. People will line up early to buy tickets and so forth. It's one of the first places, again, to my awareness, so, prove me wrong, that like people started dressing in character to show their sort of appreciation. And it became more of a communal activity where I got the impression that, a lot of people may have liked media before, like maybe Sherlock Holmes, but I don't know that there was anything that like brought them together sort of geographically and sort of formed a more cohesive community. So I guess I'm thinking
like a Sherlock convention.
Yeah, I'm thinking about like books and stuff that were popular before, like pop cinema really
as we interpret it now. No, and I would say you're right. I would say a huge part of that though is basically a lot of that stuff came later. So if you look at, if we're specifically talking about Star Wars, Star Trek, they have some overlap in some of their fandoms, but time-wise, they're in different eras. Essentially, Star Trek came first, Star Wars coming later. But both of their fandoms kind of hit at the same time in the way that we interpret it because of things like Comic-Con. Like we know San Diego Comic-Con now is this huge, all-encompassing media thing. But pretty much up until like the mid-'90s, it was straight up just a huge comic book convention. And things like that started in the 70s where it's like, hey, we're all fans of this stuff. Let's have it locally. Let's kind of get together where we can dress up. And that's where you start to see kind of the terminology like, oh, the Star Wars nerd, the Star Trek nerd, because they're dressing up and they're going to these conventions. But all that stuff doesn't kick in until like the late 70s, early 80s, if I remember correctly. So I would say that is kind of the first expression of fandom as huge parts of someone's identity. Where someone's saying, I like this thing, I want to dress up like this thing, I want to be fully immersed in this thing, and that's how you end up with people, fan fiction then becoming legitimate canon books and novelizations. That's how you end up with bands that are based off of genres of music, and now we have today like nerdcore hip hop and like all stuff like that. But it all starts at those early expressions of we don't actually get these things on cable TV. Didn't really exist. You couldn't really buy videotapes that much. VHS wasn't the ubiquitous technology until later, mid 80s, around that time. So beforehand, it was like, hey, we got to go to these conventions so we can even see these movies again, watch these shows over again if we weren't finding ways to replicate them. So yeah, a huge part of that comes from those specifically those two fan bases. So, sir, not disagreeing with you at all. You are nail on the head with that one.
All right, so let me introduce a controversial idea we can argue over. Ooh. I, as a person who spends too much time on the internet, especially too much time on Reddit, feel that you can sort of take the temperature of a fandom by looking at their public-facing web presence. So, on Reddit, it would be, Marvel memes. or prequel memes, or the Star Wars subs are very divided, which really speaks to the nature of that community, that people seem to have a favorite trilogy. They'll have a home base for that trilogy, and then they might sort of duke it out or be more polite depending on what, whether they're on our Star Wars or one of the crossover subs. So to what extent, like, is that too limited of a litmus test, or is that a sign of the times to measure a good and viable fandom that someone might want to actually create more content for?
I would say that is a limited litmus test, if only because most fandoms, most practices, most things like that, whether it's movies, video games, music, sports, the people that are the most vocal in places where you can be vocal usually represent, not saying that they aren't actually fans, but a very small, like we'll hear it all the time, the vocal minority. It's the people that, again, have accepted this thing as part of their identity so much so that they've personalized it and they've kind of taken an ownership over it in their eyes, where by and large, 90 to 80% of the people are just kind of passing through. They see these things as they kind of see, they might like them. Like the litmus test that people always tell, like, does my mom know about this? And the reason people use that as a litmus test is, all right, you and your friends and you and your social circle, everybody knows about this stuff and you all talk about it. You're kind of immersed in it. You might have some friends that know about it through osmosis. But does the average person on the street know all of these deep cut things, or are they just things that you use to kind of test the people around you and their levels of fandom? And that's where a lot of these communities are grown out of, whether it's Reddit, whether it's Twitter in some aspects, and the old forums back from the 90s and early thousands, because we're ancient now in internet years. But that's where you went to talk to people that you really knew their stuff. And now that's basically what has taken over the internet. So using that as a litmus test is limiting, because it's the people that their fandom is based on the knowledge and adoption of those things, but not necessarily the enjoyment of them, in my eyes.
Yeah, it's interesting because when prequel memes first started becoming popular, it seemed to be a place that wanted to reward people for the deep cuts, and it's a bit of a circle jerk. But if you know the next quote in a comment thread that's just going through the quotes of the movie, or which line would be funniest to reply to a meme, you could farm yourself some pretty decent karma there. And, for some people that is, a limited time entertainment, and eventually you run out. And for other people, it's hard to tell, right? Because you mentioned how people move through fandoms. And I think that's probably a more realistic view. But man, do those hardcore people sometimes really sort of run the narrative. Cruel Angel, what did you have to say on this?
I totally agree. That sounds about right. I come from like the perspective of being a long time in the anime community. I mean, I've been pretty active in the anime community since about 1997, somewhere around that. So, I mean, as of late, last 5 to 10 years has become quite a big thing, like with the advent of things like Demon Slayer and Attack on Titan and stuff like that. And you get not necessarily normies, but people that come in and somewhat new to the fandom, you obviously give them a little bit of slack because they're new, and you ask them what their fucking favorite anime is, something that's like, I don't know, 2 years old or something. And when you properly talk to the real fan base, generally they go back 30 years. Most anime fans I know, like, just won't even consider anything from the later part of the thousands. It's a really divided community. I mean, it's quite inviting for the most part, but there's kind of a division between the old heads and the normies, the newbies, So, I mean, that splinters off into a lot of other different kind of surrounding fandoms as far as the medium goes, like into like 3D anime and, stuff like that, even going as far as to hentai, which is a different kettle of fish on its own. But
porn a fandom? Oh boy, we got real deep, real fast here, people.
Hentai, I think, very much is, because it's so specialized.
It's definitely interesting seeing the transition of anime into a more mainstream kind of fandom, and seeing that like process, and seeing like different fans come in from different eras with different knowledge. Yeah, I think it's cool. I remember like passing like animes to friends in the back of math class, and that was like how I got introduced to animes. To what was it when the last episode of Dragon Ball Z Super like premiered and they were like streaming it on like in Brazil like across the world. Like that's awesome. That's cool.
Oh yeah.
Oh
Yeah,
man, there was definitely a good old days of pirating media where,
Oh, yeah.
some good Samaritan / evildoer could just stream something from their region live on the internet for other people. But now it gets taken down because that's the law. Shark Steaks, do you want an opportunity to introduce yourself and share your 2 cents?
Sure. Yeah. So I'm in a lot of communities, I guess. I'm kind of a lurker. I'll like talk to my friends, but when it comes to like online communities, I kind of just watch. But I just want to bring up 2 fandoms I think are very old. The Tolkien fandom with the original book trilogy before there was even films of it or even animated movies. People had buttons like saying Frodo lives, and like even people graffitiing around the place. It was a really big kind of worldwide thing that has led to the fandom as to what it is now. Another fandom I'm pretty versed in is the Godzilla fandom. And that started in 1954. And
that
the
has
original
changed over
film
time.
is the original film's kind of considered a masterpiece, but it has, I don't know, 30 something movies now, and it's gaining new fans today. I mean, you look at the new King Kong Godzilla, I mean, that brought in like $300-400 million based on an almost 70-year-old franchise. And like it's getting new fans. I love it. Like I'm 31 and I love seeing like younger people bringing up the new movie who weren't, clearly weren't around for the old days. Neither was I guess, technically, but it's a lot of fun. Just want to talk about anime also real quick. There is like a lot of gatekeeping, especially when you delve into the manga side of it.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. Like literally, like I've seen discussions where it's like people get into arguments over like, oh, especially when it's popular stuff.
Yeah,
And,
I find especially the Berserk fandom absolutely fucking manic, dude.
Yeah, it goes crazy sometimes.
This is why I love it. That's exactly why I like it, though, because like half of it's trolling and half of it is just the full-on gatekeepers that are just, you have to read the manga. The manga is far better. I'm like, okay, well, it's an adaptation, so relax.
That's actually,
Which is interesting to me because as someone who is more of an outsider on some of the anime, particularly, it's just kind of was never my thing so much. I find myself wondering whether the enjoyment of the fandom gets kind of meta, right? It's like,
yeah,
I enjoy being a fan of this because of the fandom, not because of the content itself, which is actually the thing that speaks to me. If that makes any sense. So that's kind of what that's what I tend to observe. To your point about the arguments, it's like almost an argument over whether you belong there versus what it means to you, I guess, if that makes sense, which I think is interesting.
No, it's all about the barrier of entry at this point. And that's kind of what I was alluding to before. And I didn't realize we were going to get to it so soon. But yeah, it's all about, like, you all have the jokes like, oh, I met a girl, she's into video games. Did you quiz her on Mario's Insane? Like, it's all about the barrier of entry for how much do you know? Do you deserve to say that you're a fan? And we've seen now, it's weird to see it come full cycle because I was also one of those kids that like, oh, I got some mangas and some animes passed to me when I was in middle school and high school. And then you see that transition of like, oh, then Toonami started like doing early Adult Swim and all that sort of thing. And those were your barriers for entry. And then we all grew up and now, in essence, the royal we are now in charge. We are the gatekeepers of literally getting this stuff made. The reason Dragon Ball Superhero, that one that just got theatrical release, can be theatrical release is because there's an entire 2 generations of anime kids that it's normal for them now. Like we grew up talking about it. There is no ridiculous barrier of entry having to go through some seedy back ways to see these things. And then you see that next generation of people that resent that. Like, how dare you be able to easily see this stuff? No, you didn't see the real hardcore grainy VHSs we got. It's like, but I'm still a part of this now. Show me those. It's like you were holding my hand, you were ushering me through, and then you slapped it down because I didn't take the right prerequisite exam. That's what
totally
fandoms
get that.
turn into now.
Just don't even appreciate the hustle. Don't even appreciate it.
I get that, but I see your point of view, and I'm absolutely okay with that. Like, I'm more than happy to talk to like a newer anime fan and say, "Oh wow, you may be coming in on like Demon Slayer and Attack on Titan. Why not check out something like Sengoku Basara or like the old Street Fighter anime or Doom Megalopolis, old shit." But most of the newer anime fans I know are just like, "Oh no, old shit's old fashioned. It looks old." Like.
Well, I think that's
Does
interesting.
anyone else?
Go ahead.
Sorry. I was asking if everyone remembered when they used to play animes on HBO on like Saturday mornings or like Sunday mornings. Used to play like Spirited Away and Howl's Moving Castle and all the kind of movies from that director. I forget what his name is. That was just like one other place.
Yeah, that's all Miyamoto stuff.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's interesting you mentioned Street Fighter, and I was thinking about this when he was talking about Dragon Ball Z before, because I have a 9-year-old nephew in Florida, and he loves Dragon Ball Z. He's read a couple of things, but really his love of it stems from video games. It stems from the recent Dragon Ball Z video games, which I'm not a big gamer, so to speak, anymore either, but I kind of laughed at him a little bit because I was like, it just doesn't look like that's very hard. It looks like it kind of it seems like the video games now, and I know I'm not trying to go too much up on a tangent, but I reminded him, like, I remember playing Street Fighter and absolutely getting my what handed to me, and it being hard. Like, it was a struggle, and I was watching him play it, and he didn't seem to have really any technical skill. He was just kind of pressing the same button, but the game kind of rewarded him by letting him be invincible.
Which game was it,
anyways.
if I may ask?
I can't remember. It was some kind of Dragon
Fighter
Ball Z
Z
game.
because Fighter Z is like on the street fighter kind of level of technicality.
The point that I'm making is, it was like, dude, this doesn't look hard. You're just pressing the same button and it's letting you win anyways, right? So it kind of reminded me of the thought process of what you were saying before about these newer fans, I guess, in these different areas. But when someone's 9 years old, I don't even know if you're able to have a discussion with them about what being a real fan is. They just think it's cool. Right?
They just are like, "Oh, Goku has orange, and I like orange."
Cool. Yeah.
Well, and I feel like that's like a purer. I feel like there's a lot of people in their older age that are really yearning for that early nostalgia of like, wow, look at Luke Skywalker's lightsaber. That's Nito Burrito. Like, and that's the extent of their knowledge about it, because everything is new and fresh and wonderful. And, I feel like there's often like a lot of bitterness when stuff is especially served up for a younger generation, and you sort of age to a point where you can't go back to that simplicity anymore.
And not only can you not go back,
mad.
Not only can you not go back to that simplicity, but you're angry at yourself for knowing things. Like, I talk about this in other areas. It's not specifically about fandom, but when I'm doing my freelance reviews and doing some critiques, I'll run into people that are like, "Oh, this is too predictable. I saw this coming, et cetera, et cetera." And then I watch it. I'm like, "Oh, it's not so much that you saw coming. Like, they're just kind of following a template, like an obvious. This is a heist movie. You know how heist movies work.
There's a formula.
There's a formula to it, and it's not that it's like, yes, things can still be too predictable within a formula, but it's like, if you've been watching movies, like, I am 36 years old.
Enjoy the ride.
I am a through and through cinephile. Like, I see multiple movies in theaters a week, that sort of thing. I can't get mad at myself because I know this stuff. I spent 36 years learning it. So I can't look at it and be like, "Oh, this is wrong. How dare they make it too easy for me?" It's like, no, this is my years of knowledge and expertise kind of coming into play. And now I can't go back. I can't not know the things that I know. So, and I see some people reacting to that angrily, and they're getting mad at the younger generations for it, where they can enjoy it and they're learning this along the way. And the kids that are growing up, the MC, like, it's the quick connection I make is, one of the girls that she plays America in Doctor Strange, the newest Doctor Strange, she was 2 years old when the first Iron Man came out. So all she's known her entire life is MCU, and she's able to grow up with it, and that's her template for things. And now we are mad at people her age because they're still enjoying it through those eyes. And that's where you get into some fandoms, not how all people operate, but that's part of that barrier, part of that cynicism and anger, because we in ourselves can't go back and see it with that naivete and that ignorance, for lack of a better term.
I just have to say this really quick throwaway thing. It's like you're mad at them because they don't know Ghostface Killer has a cameo in the Iron Man movie, and they're like, "Who was Ghostface Killer?"
Exactly. Who was Ghostface? Like, that means nothing to me.
Playing. I just know that's a symbol. That they make music. Oh, I didn't know that. I just thought it was a symbol. You can't get mad at them for that.
And it's also, I've talked about this before with other people. It's like the cultural touchstones aren't the same across generations, especially now because there's just so much media out there. But we're still expecting. And I'm saying kids, I don't want but anybody younger, basically if you were born after YouTube, it was a thing. So you're still in your 20s, but you're young. But you're expecting them to hold the same cultural touchstones in decades that we held, even though that's stuff that's 30 years older for them. That's like our parents saying, "Oh, you don't care about this band?" It's like, well, that was a band in the 60s and I'm 12. So no, not yet. Let me give you the time. Let me acquire that information. But there might be a cutoff. I might not want to go back that far. I might want to start sometime like in 86, 88. Start from me there. Don't bring me back way too far where even you would have lost interest in their same position.
To what extent is the conflict and sort of tension we see between fandoms just a product of people sort of aging out of the target demographic? Is a lot of this just sour grapes over, well, they made the Star Wars prequels for my daughter and not for me, and now I'm angry, garble, garble, garble. Or is there more to it than that?
That is a huge part of it, I would say. And it's people not realizing they've aged out of the demographic because the things that they're saying, oh, garble, garble, they made that for my daughter. I mean, they made that stuff for you too.
Garble, garble, yes.
And we talked, I don't know if it was you and I, no, it's another buddy of mine I was talking about it with also, with the same name. But he was talking about Ewoks, and he was like, do you know the Ewok line? And I was like, basically, if you were already a cool teenager by the time Ewoks existed, you hate them. But if you were just young enough for teddy bears with spears kicking ass to be your thing, perfect. You kind of love them. And you can always see that definitive line. It's like that stuff has always been baked into all
They're
things.
also cannibals.
Also true.
Later media has been much more clear. They want to eat their
They want to eat you. But it's the things like that seem to turn off older
Nibble you to death
within their fandoms. It's like, oh, that they put that kitty stuff in. It's like, hey, that kitty stuff's always been there. You just notice it now because you're no longer a kid. That is a huge part of it. I think another part is also just as the things that were once considered niche have become way more mainstream just through us being we're the ones with the money now, quote unquote, not actually anymore because of inflation and all that.
Not according to my bank account.
Yeah, exactly. But we are the decision makers in terms of the consuming audience. And they are like, oh, here's all the stuff that you loved as a kid. And we're watching it again. And if it's not specifically the things from when we were a kid, but versions of it updated, we kind of shun it. Because like, no, the stuff I liked when a kid was different. It kind of was and it kind of wasn't.
All right. So I'm going to throw one in that doesn't get talked about a lot. I'm going to throw out Power Rangers. Me and my daughter did remote school.
I love that.
We were doing remote school, and it was a great time to throw in some Power Rangers episodes, and she was really into it. And I was like, all right, let's try this latest season. Let's see what they got. And I was like, you know what? It's actually not too shabby. It's pretty cool. So I can say that I'm genuinely looking forward to the next season of Power Rangers. But part of it is because I'm approaching it as family entertainment, which is what it's meant to be in Japan. But oh man, I'm not even going to get into Sentai. Sentai is some crazy shit.
Yeah, Super Sentai and that whole situation is nuts. Actually, I was also drunkenly watching Power Rangers episodes like a couple weeks ago. And I was like, oh, a lot of these, they don't hold up, but since they've been using the same formula now for 30 years, whether you're watching Mighty Morphin Era or whatever time jump super police they're talking about now, the formula is still exactly the same. And it still just works. And if you
but how much can you polish that formula and give a new spin to it? And but again, I'm not going to be mad. Every episode of Power Rangers is so predictable. They just call their Zords to finish this thing off. This is terrible writing. I'm not going down that route. I know what I got into.
Yeah, if they change the formula, sorry, I didn't mean to overtalk. But if they change the formula, old fans might get mad.
Oh, they go apoplectic. Yeah. They'd hate it.
Yeah, but I had a funny story about Power Rangers when I was a kid. I'd watch it, and my parents would stop me from watching it because I would go into karate mode and karate chop the house down.
I don't know about you, but where I grew up, there were karate studio commercials targeted at kids everywhere on TV. They're like, here, send your kid here to kick things. I don't think you were alone in that department.
Yeah, I don't know if I remember. I just remember commercials as a kid from like Nickelodeon and stuff being just crazy and in your face.
Oh, the '90s era advertisements to children. Like I can't speak to
Nickelodeon still was crazy.
I can't speak to a lot of it now because I'm not around enough children to see children's programming. But I just remember I've watched a lot of our older commercials because they pop up on YouTube when you watch nostalgic stuff. And it's like, oh, they were like extreme and Dutch angles, and they were the way they advertised the kids. Oh man, it's like
but just even what was available to kids. You know, I can recall.
It's crazy.
I mean, not that Ninja is. I don't know. I don't think we can call Ninja as that's too big of a word to call it a fandom, but just the concept that everybody that just chimed in was like they had a period where they were like, I'm a ninja. Or like, you know, but anyway, the thought process, I can remember, you know, the early 90s, and somehow some of the neighborhood kids and I got our hands on like a magazine where you could order real ninja, like actual ninja stuff.
Actual weaponry,
yes, that could hurt someone. Like, it's crazy to think about that.
We all had a friend who had ninja stars.
That was an episode of South Park. There's some reality there.
It is. And that, I would say that's more of zeitgeist than it is fandom, because that's just basically PR people and marketing people realize like, oh, Ninja Turtles are popular, Power Rangers are popular, all this stuff. Wait, what's the common denominator? Karate. All right, let's just put karate in everything. And then now we're buying Ninja Stars from the back of East Bay magazine.
I will say Nickelodeon. I would just say that Nickelodeon shows now are still just as they're seizure inducing. Like I once had a seizure like watching them, and they're every like 9 minutes. Like every 9 minutes, there's some seizure-inducing commercial throwing like a truck or a car or a dollhouse or like some type of like crazy blanket that turns into a backpack. It's not even subtle.
Yeah, man. Advertising is fierce. I've done a pretty good job of avoiding most advertising, but yeah, that those toys commercials are they've done their psychological homework to reach into the brains of their audience. Which, you know, like I was just saying, I'll watch Power Rangers. Power Rangers is 100% a toy commercial, and everyone knows it. And I don't think it'll ever stop being that. I mean, I guess the comics are perhaps not toy commercials in the same way.
What's that deep relationship between like merchandising toys and all these shows kind of to begin with?
I can fully answer that question for you. So this is how the history and pop culture stuff comes in. Basically, they had to create a law. I can't remember exactly when it kicked in, where they could not explicitly advertise to children through their like programming anymore. So if you look at old children's shows from like the 60s, 70s up to the early 80s, like, oh, it's the Howdy Doody show. And they're like, well, here's a toy commercial like mixed in with the actual characters playing with the toy. And they're like, you can't do that to kids because they can't separate what that stuff is. So then you see that separation happen in terms of how cartoons are created in the 80s, where it's like, here's a toy like Transformers that is blatantly, or here's a cartoon that is blatantly a commercial for the toys. But since they don't actually mention the Transformers toy within the universe, when the kids go out, it's like, oh, cool, that they're making that connection on their own.
Just never break character and everything's fine.
Everything is fine. And so you start to see that where they truly create entire franchises in terms of animation because it was cheaper. That was just the marketing. That was the marketing for stuff. And the apex of that would be something like Power Rangers, where they're like, let's just cobble together some freaking footage from Japan that we got dirt cheap, make a show out of that. Then we can sell a whole bunch of toys. So that's kind of like what that marriage is. And like, as they've gotten more sophisticated with it, yeah, they've just gotten better about it.
Yeah, of course, there's a Story Train episode of Rick and Morty where they kind of explore that concept, right, amongst others.
It's like whenever they make a new Pixar movie and they go through their designs, they're like, which character can we make plushes out of?
I feel like Rick and Morty is that sort of fever dream advertising sort of stuff, but for adults.
Oh, if you want to talk fandoms and like just gatekeeping, Rick and Morty is a good place to jump off right there.
It's all about the Szechuan sauce. This whole thing's been about the Szechuan sauce.
I think I got some of that in my garage too. I think I actually did go find some.
I know
you could make some money off that.
I know one of the people that got the original batch of Szechuan sauce after that episode, and he sold it for a crap ton of money. Wow. Just the people that, yeah, and people be like, oh, it's the Rick and Morty Szechuan sauce. I was like, no, it was a real sauce, everybody. Like, this is the thing. What is happening? and just watching how people reacted to stuff like that, and literally attacking McDonald's locations because of a sauce that was mentioned on a cartoon that they like. Like that's, oh man, it's wild.
Which then takes this into a whole nother place, right? It's like this place where it's like, hey guys, this is fantasy and this is the world. Don't attack the people.
You have immersed yourself too far into your fantasy fandom, and now this is coming out of the back end. And that, again, vocal minorities, but all those vocal people can get together in one place and galvanize.
Can I mention one fandom that's not particularly mine, but like one that kind of blew my mind? And I forgot who I was with when I watched this, but it was a documentary called "When the Screaming Stops," and it was about a boy band from London, and it was like one of those like one-hit wonder boy bands, and it was just crazy watching them. They were doing a reunion tour, and they were interviewing like the fans that came to see them, and it's literally like 30, 35, 36-year-old like women, but they've been reverted into teenagers. And it kind of like highlights this kind of formula that there was to like the whole boy band fandom, and again, kind of the marketing and money about it, where it was like these guys weren't even that good. But it had nothing to do with how hard their fans loved them and what they're willing to do, and like this kind of like regression to like I'm a teenage girl again when they get there, which frankly I do for other music too all the time, so I understand that. But it was just like the power of it. It's so sometimes it's like it doesn't even matter what the thing is.
That's interesting. You mentioned that, Jones in the Cut. I actually had that question at the beginning. I've been kind of waiting to see where music might pop up in this. Obviously, the word music, music fandom. I mean, it kind of lends itself very well to this conversation. I'm just sort of curious how is there sort of a distinction, or is that sort of out of bounds for this conversation?
Have you guys seen Turning Red? And I know that it is essentially a kid/family Disney show, but they cover this sort of boy band phenomenon pretty. I don't know how many people notice this, but I feel like they like kind of broke down how boy bands work to an extent in that movie.
Oh, I forgot about that. Yes, they did.
Yeah, I actually enjoyed that movie, and I thought that whole aspect was pretty funny because it really captured the essence of being a teenager and growing up.
Yeah. You're like, I've got some hormones and these guys are doing some things, and that's part of the contract.
Yeah. Like one of my favorite scenes is that she's like in love with this guy who literally is just like a guy going through puberty and with pimples and everything. I just thought that was funny.
Well,
go ahead, my brother. Sorry.
No, the reason I asked about the music piece is because, I mean, we're talking about boy bands right now, but if I'm being honest, it's like Wu-Tang Clan is like a boy band for me, right? Like, like seriously. I mean, when a couple years ago I went to my first Wu-Tang Clan show, finally. I mean, I became a fan of them when I was probably like 12, right, when they first came out.
In my area, during an election cycle, there were signs that said "Elections come and go, but Wu-Tang is forever."
But to the point
that
of
was
like
when I
boy
realized
and being hysterical, it's like at that concert, I was 12. My wife took my hoodie from me, and I just rapped every word for like an hour and a half. I was 12 for an hour, Yeah. So it's kind of interesting, how I can cut across different things.
Absolutely. It absolutely cuts across different things. Like, and that's what I said before, whether it's movies, music, whatever it is, but it has everything to do with when you discover it. And it's not so much like it's not going to be across the board, like, oh, you won't be able to find this. But realistically, how many things do you react to that you discovered when you were in your mid-20s the same way you did when you react to if you found it when you were 12? Everything you found and you attached to you when you were 12 years old was the most important thing ever because you found it. It was you and your friends, and you got to be like, no, that it represents me to a way. By the time you hit your 20s, and I don't want to say cynical, but you kind of just experienced more, it doesn't hold that same visceral, emotional, passionate reaction. But your stuff from when you were a kid, no matter what, and you and it's hard to even see it differently as you get older. Put it like this: I'm also a huge Wu-Tang fan. I've been to a bunch of their shows. It is very obvious to me that those dudes are in their 50s and 60s now, and I love it. I love watching my rap heroes get older because that's something that wasn't afforded to a lot of them. But I also revert to that same 12-year-old, even though I'm watching a bunch of 50 and 60-year-old men kind of going through the motions now. I'm not saying they don't enjoy it, but like it doesn't hit me the same but I still react the same. It's like, nope,
Right.
protect your neck. I'm there. I'm that same 10-year-old that discovered this in my dad's crate of all of his vinyls. I haven't. You don't feel that anymore because the discovery isn't the same as it once was.
Right.
A reaction that really gets me, and I've kind of fallen out of the wrestling fandom, but it's like whenever I tune in and it's like, oh, Stone Cold Steve Austin is back, or whoever, it really, really takes me back to when I was a kid watching that.
I still lose my shit. I still lose it. It doesn't matter.
Yeah,
It doesn't matter.
Fuck off.
Castor Troy has seen me lose my shit in the presence of Stone Cold and The Rock as a full-grown man.
And I was at WrestleMania this past year. I was there when Stone Cold came out, and I'm watching 80,000 to 100,000 people completely react to tears to a man in denim shorts come out. Stone Cold stun some people, even though we know he could barely move. It's like, doesn't matter. That glass hits. I'm a 12-year-old again. It's Monday night, and I'm in the living room, and I'm high-fiving my friends. Like,
God, I love wrestling.
Reaction.
I'm hitting people over the head with the tin from the popcorn tins, to Stone Cold music.
I think Stone Cold, and I'm sure there's a bunch of WWE fandoms we can touch on, but I feel like Stone Cold was the first one that helped me realize just how psychological WWE is. That Stone Cold is everyone who's sick and tired of their boss and wants to beat the shit out of them with a bedpan. And that's something that a lot of people can identify with. And that's what makes it so powerful.
And they've said as much. They said it in real time when they were finally letting people behind the curtain. They were saying, no, that character exists because who doesn't want to punch their boss in the face? Who doesn't want to flip everybody off around him that's kind of annoying them? Like, he was, especially for that time, that late 90s, he was very much an audience cipher in a way that a lot of people hadn't been. Because as much as people might have loved Hulk Hogan, nobody could be like, oh, I think I'm Hulk Hogan. Like, no, he's built like a steroided out animation character. Stone Cold, while he was a man in great shape, he still looked like the dude that just kind of worked at your local AutoZone. Like, there was just a very approachable.
He could also yell. I think he had a style of yelling that connected with people. And, I think since then, a lot of people have tried to develop a good way of yelling and shouting that connects with their fan base.
Oh yeah, he was also very uniquely talented in a lot of ways that made things look easy that are absolutely not easy. The best analogy for him currently is somebody like Steph Curry, where everybody's like, oh, I can shoot the basketball like Steph Curry. It's like, no, you can't. Steph Curry's still 6'4" with parents that were athletes and a dad that was in the NBA who could pay for all this stuff. He's uniquely talented in a way that you're not, but he makes you feel like you are, and that's what matters. So you can buy his ugly shoes.
It's interesting you guys transition. We transition from music, and then we transition to wrestling. Two of these places that kind of have built-in fans are part of the experience versus some of these other media pieces aren't necessarily built for people to follow them, even though they kind of are. But now you just mentioned sports, right? Where there's also fans built into that. So it's interesting how we've kind of gone to those different places. But
no, you made the connection that I was hoping we would get to, in that there's the fandoms where the fans are very much part of the creation experience, where it's like, all right, we want Stone Cold to come out there. We need Steph Curry to do well. So the fans have to prop them up and like, no, we're cheering. We want this thing to happen. Whereas other fandoms are based around something where it's like, no, the product is done. The story is done. We're giving it to you. How are you reacting? And once upon a time, we would get those things well after they were finished. Now we kind of get them still after they're finished, but the reaction is still almost immediate and in real time, where people are critiquing, saying they should have done this, they should switch this got to be what happens next. And it's thousands, if not millions of people with dissenting ideas on what the right way to do something is, but still only one point of creation. But all of those fans still feel like they own something and they're not getting what they paid for.
Cough, cough, Game of Thrones.
Exactly. Game of Thrones is a huge one. And I was disappointed by the finale, like most people were, because it felt rushed, but not because I wasn't part of any petitions for them to reshoot and rewrite an entire final season. That was the thing that happened. And it's like, that's the bridge too far for me.
All right. So that segues really well into something I wanted to bring up. And I listened to, this is not something I got directly off Reddit, but it is definitely something I've seen on Reddit a lot. That there's, I think the podcast I listened to labeled it the Fandom Menace, that this group of Star Wars fans became particularly activated around the time that The Last Jedi was dropped. And there's all manner of criticism about Last Jedi to be had. But what was most interesting was that this was also a time where Q of the sort of QAnon conspiracies was said to be particularly active as well, and that there were narratives that started showing up in portions of the Star Wars fandom that sounded very similar to sort of QAnon style conspiracy theories. One of them being that there was sort of this power struggle between Kathleen Kennedy and others in like the decision-making part of Star Wars to try to make it so the basically that the sequel trilogy didn't happen or was a life was but a dream scenario, and that they were going to bring George Lucas back and that he was going to make a new trilogy and everything would be right with the world. And obviously this is a conspiracy theory that the I've seen manifest to some extent in some of the subreddits that talk about Star Wars. So, like, to what extent are these fandoms something that, we talked about how, creating a fandom for the sake of selling toys is perfectly legitimate, and we like that. But a lot of people seem to be doing some interesting stuff. And I think when you suggest, like, retconning and, like, reshooting stuff, it feels like we've stepped into something different, that we've gone over a precipice from fandom to something else.
We've seen that fandoms can be weaponized. That's a lot of what this is. And it's connected, but it's not directly the same thing. Well, we saw the same thing with the release the Snyder Cut situation, especially in that piece that came out soon after, I want to say about a month or so ago, where they discovered like a lot of the initial spark that got that going was fake. It was, yes, there were people out there that definitely believe that there was a Snyder Cut version of the movie out there, but you see now it's like, no, there was a PR firm that got a lot of 4chan QAnon type stuff going and said, just start the conversation this way because you can weaponize that vocal minority of fans to then carry out what you're saying, whether it was true or not. And so you saw that it goes back to Kathleen Kennedy's situation where it's like, no, there's talks internally of retconning everything. That was likely 100% false. But that's all certain people need to hear to just get into gear and say, yup, there was something, they're hiding it from us. They're keeping the real thing. They want to stop us from making us happy. And then you go back even further because you've seen that good faith fandom has gotten things to come back. You've seen shows that were canceled soon get one last season or maybe a movie. And that was like good faith. Like, no, we just want more of this. Please make that happen.
So you think that sort of validated a sort of activist component to fandoms that says, no, we're going to get Firefly back on the air. And that's something that might actually happen.
And it's not operating in good faith. Like, it's the other side of the coin. It's literally, they think they're doing the exact same thing, but it's really, it's Cobra Kai. It's the story from the villain's perspective at that point. We're like, no, we're doing the good thing. We're trying to get it brought back. It's like, no, you're harassing people to get a very specific version of something back that never actually existed. And you don't see the difference there. And that's when it becomes super unhealthy.
I think one of the strangest things for me is the sort of like, we're going to get rid of Kathleen Kennedy, which I've come to understand as a person with quite a bit of chops in the movie world, and put, George Lucas back in, who, like, there was an entire documentary called George Lucas versus the People and much more about why he was not a great person to be in charge.
The same fans that are trying to get George Lucas back have lambasted the original prequel trilogy for 20 years. They hated what George Lucas did. They didn't like the back half of what he did with the original trilogy. Again, going back to the Ewok example. But now all of a sudden there's a revisionist history saying, like, no, bring Lucas back. He did everything right the first time. It's like, Lucas was a creative genius. Lucas, he built this. We can't deny that. But if you watch any documentary about the original trilogy, you can see it was a lot of art by committee with him and his people and enough people around him going, hey, George, maybe that's not the great idea to have them be actual samurais. Let's give them like a light sword or something different. Maybe let's not have them be making out in the first scene if you want them to be brother and sister later. Like, there was a give and take that was there that they think Lucas did all on his own, which has never been the case.
Hey, I just need to say it so people know it. George Lucas made a lot of changes to Star Wars, but none of those changes removed any of the incest. So there you have it, folks. There you have it.
I think I have two thoughts. Go ahead.
Oh, no, you're cool. You're cool. Just making a joke. You're fine.
I have two thoughts with the George Lucas situation. Maybe some fans were like, you never know what you got till it's gone. And you're like, oh, maybe I was too harsh on him. My second thought, I don't want necessarily George Lucas to be back, but it would be kind of cool if he was involved in a project or something, like maybe directed one more movie or something.
Doesn't he do consulting? Or like,
it's like
I feel like he's still getting
hardly
a Disney
consulting.
paycheck.
It's more like Dave Filoni's or Jon Favreau. They just show him something just to see if he likes it or not. He doesn't have like a whole lot of involvement, I think.
I think at least as far as the Lucas portion of things, I want to be optimistic about the people that create the art that I've always loved, but also we as fans have to accept that sometimes the game just might not be in them anymore. Sometimes that was their opus and they pulled that off, because you can always see if you keep letting them create and you keep forcing them to create, the return on investment ain't there. The albums get worse, the movies get worse, and if you keep forcing them and saying I want this point of view, I mean, we're seeing that right now with a lot of people who are going through it for political reasons. But when's the last time that Shorty that did the Harry Potter books has done anything that you cared about?
I know what you're saying. I feel that exact way about Pokemon. Like the games have been going for 25 years, something like that. And I'm not being funny. We peaked at gold and silver and all that. Like after that, it was okay. But it's been progressively getting worse, and now it's just about what gimmicks can we throw in to make this good? Oh,
Missing No rights now. They need to make Missing No a legitimate Pokemon. Give him his rights. It should be Pokemon number 000. You don't even have to change the Pokédex. I fixed Pokemon for you. You're welcome.
Well, it's interesting because everything that we're talking about right now, especially as it relates to creators, is this thought process that the art is not actually the wholeness of who they are as people. I'm just giving them a little bit of an out on this, which is to say they created a piece of art. We really like it. You guys are fans. But actually, after I did that, I don't have any more ideas about that. And I actually just kind of going to want to go ride horses or something, or become a gardener, because now that's what I'm interested in. And that's actually okay. And so you guys care about the art that I created more than I do at this point. Now it is just a mechanism for a corporation to make money, and that's fine for that. But me personally, as a creator, I actually just enjoy my houseplants now. That's where I do. You want to know about that?
I 100% agree. An example I use for that with a lot of people is one of my favorite authors of all time, Stephen King. Say what you want to about the man. He's a kooky little dude, but he talks about writing. He's like, it's just something I need to get out of me. And he's like, at this point, yes, sometimes you still get a banger out of me. Sometimes you might get a stinker that you don't really care for. And I get that my work is super important to you. I appreciate that as a writer. I'm speaking as Stephen King now. But he was like, I don't remember most of the stuff. It's literally my job that I just happen to love. You care about it because you've adopted that. That's something that you super do care about. For me, it's 1,000 words I wrote over a weekend. And I'm like, it's a level of separation that a lot of artists have, but they can't publicly have, because not every artist is anointed like Stephen King is. But it's exactly what you said, Tribe. It's like, nah, man, I got that out of me, and now I just want to hang out with my family. Maybe I might revisit it. Maybe I might want to do something else. But that's it. I'm done.
Right. Yeah. The thing that I actually care about, to your point, you gave the thing that is probably true for most people, is I actually want to hang out with my family. That's actually the thing that I care about, actually, which is no different than how we all live our lives when it comes to work, because we sort of forget that these artists, there's a point at which it does become work, right? And so they just want to go home and do the same things we do, right? And care about the things that we all care about outside of our fandoms.
That's a perfect segue. Can I steal that? Can I steal this for my segue here?
Steal away.
Go for it.
All right. So, Castor Troy, have you seen the latest Matrix movie? Just yes or no?
Yes.
Okay, good. So we're talking about artists who, I made my art and now I'm done. And I feel like the latest Matrix movie is an example of an artist whose hand was essentially forced. Like, they almost tell you in the movie itself that, the studio was going to do it either way. So either I lose the rights to it or I'm the one who screws it up because it's my art anyway. Is that a truthful way to look at where the Matrix franchise has gone, or have I bought into some bad stuff here?
It is entirely the first act of the movie. Them saying,
okay, so I'm not crazy. That did happen.
through that boardroom.
It's a very meta.
They're going to mess up the movies if we don't bring back the original creator, or the game if we don't bring back the original creator. That was the Wachowskis talking to us, the fans, about how they dealt with Warner Brothers. Like, listen, they were going to make this regardless, so we came in to salvage some semblance of what we thought it was. But you could also tell, like, they clearly didn't really want to make it either. Oh man, that movie's a mess. But you were 100% right.
Very, very interesting. Sense8, which is the show that the Wachowski sisters worked on and on Netflix, is actually a pretty good show. And I think it has a lot of kind of elements and kind of ideas that they brought from The Matrix and then added on some other stuff too. So, I think artistically, Sense8 was actually something that I enjoyed from that artist who made The Matrix.
Good show, but kind of a mess.
Oh yeah, the Wachowskis are another one where, while I appreciate their art and their work, they definitely still need something. They need that conflicting force to kind of rein in some of their stuff. And Sense8 could have, like you said, kind of a mess sometimes, but also tangentially was able to get a proper send off, because when they canceled it, the fandom said, "Hey, we just want to see them get a proper ending," and they were allowed to do that. Notice no one had to be harassed for it. There weren't super big ugly petitions. They just say, "Hey, can we just get one more couple episodes just to give them a proper ending?" And that was it.
And then you get like guys like who the author and artist for like One Piece who are going to write it to the day they die.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, I mean, that series has like 100 volumes. That's like unprecedented for comics and whatnot. And like, he enjoys it is what I'm saying. Like, he wants to do that.
Okay,
Right.
hot take, One Piece is shite.
I mean, I've
That
never
is a
read it.
hot
I just
take.
know that he has worked on it for a very long time. So, and in contrast to, directors or artists who move on to do something different.
Also, the manga process, or like the process of like making a manga for a studio, usually leaves a lot of artists never making mangas again afterwards. You usually make like one, you kind of burn out doing that, and then so the idea that he's been doing 100 volumes for that long is actually kind of crazy.
Yeah,
Like
like
that's exactly what happened to Miura. That's exactly what happened to Kentaro Miura. I mean, that's part of the reason why he had such bad heart problems. It was so stressful. It just drove him to an early death, which is a terrible shame because we're fucking years off of Berserk ending. It's tragic.
Yo, is that Conor McGregor?
Who? No.
It's McGregor.
I guess we're talking MMA now. I don't know.
Well, they have departed, so we need not be concerned about it.
Thank God for that.
It's funny that we're talking about how like fandoms move, and we're like, one person's writing this 100-volume thing, and we're saying we're talking about the repercussions of what that did to them, while also simultaneously people are like, no, we still need George R.R. Martin and his 80-year-old body to continue pounding out whatever books are left with Game of Thrones. It's like, hey, we need to learn. Maybe pushing these people to keep doing these things after a while, not good for them. Just leave them be. We just might not get the end of that book. I'm fine with it. I'm okay if he's happy doing whatever he's doing. Hopefully he's just describing food longingly to his family.
Right. He's said to be writing books, but it's like taking forever, and there's no sign that they'll be publishable anytime soon, right?
Yeah, I mean, because he's finally started to say the quiet part out loud, where he's like, I'm really rich now, and I don't actually have to do this. I was pumping out these tomes before because that's how I made money. Like, I was a working artist. Now he's like, no, I got this HBO money, I got this licensing money, I got this producer money. I'm good. I don't need to do this anymore.
Yeah, I think I'll go have a sandwich or
cannot fault him
something.
for
I
that.
think I'll go have a sandwich now.
That is the American dream. I would say the global dream is to be overpaid and underworked. George R.R. Martin got there. No matter when he finally got there, he got there. And I, as a fan of his, cannot say in good faith, hey, come back and keep writing some more. Because I know I wouldn't. I would not.
So does the Game of Thrones fandom feel like they can't go on without him, that no one else is trustworthy for the true source material, so they're unwilling to let him go? Is that their current state?
That is exactly what's happening.
Something I was just thinking about.
They need a taste of the George Lucas saltiness to get him out of there.
Also, are we making a distinction between like people who like Game of Thrones and people who just get really like addicted to like whatever TV show trend is going on and get really into it? Like, are those the same fans? I know there might be some like.
I think that's a really good question, actually.
I think it's a Venn diagram situation where there definitely is some crossover. But also what you just hit on, Jones, is a lot of it is Game of Thrones, as of right now, was the last true cultural appointment TV. Like, and before that, the last one was probably what? Lost? Like, we've lost that thing that was once a huge part of fandom. Was like, I just like watching the popular TV show. It's the water cooler talk. We can get around it. Game of Thrones was it, and it didn't end in the way that it wasn't like a universally praised ending. So now it's like, oh, well, the out that people have is, well, George R. R. Martin said that was the proper ending because he gave them the cliff notes and they kind of filled in the blanks. And now that we weren't satisfied with that, he let that little inkling out, said, oh, I might change some stuff. Now both of those fandoms kicked back into gear. Just like the normal, I just want to watch TV fandoms, plus the book fandoms, plus specifically Game of Thrones, like specifically TV show fandom, like that all converged to make one like three-headed beast that's all going at Martin right now.
You know, which is really sad. I have not watched a new show yet. I have HBO and I haven't watched it. And the reason I haven't watched it is because of the fandom, frankly. I just got tired of seeing the Reddit talk about the shows, and I just got burned out from just even hearing about it, even though I really enjoyed it. I never read the books, but I enjoyed the show and I felt like I was a fan. But just the conversation around it just is like, ugh. And even I'm seeing the conversation about the current, show that's out now, and it's all just craziness, and that's kind of making me not want to watch it, honestly.
Well, two things. One,
I stopped many shows.
The show is pretty friggin' good. Like, just I've watched the first 3 episodes so far. Nice, good stuff. But 2, you can take solace in the hypocrisy, because all those people that said, I'm never watching Game of Thrones again, B&B burned me, blah, 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 blah. House of the Dragon had the biggest premiere of any HBO show ever. So all those people are full of it. All of them watched it, and they're going to complain about it, sure, maybe, but they still watched it because, as we know, people largely don't vote with their viewing eyes and their dollars like they claim to. Like everybody pretty much hate watches things all the time, which is great for the companies, but bad for the fans. I guess I can't wrap my head around it because I don't do it. But yeah,
I don't hate watch, but for me in Star Wars, like I'm not excited anymore. I'll just say that, but I'll watch the new content in hopes that they make something really nice. And like Mandalorian's really good, but like other than that, there's not much going on, but they're still releasing stuff. And I'm just like always in the hopes that maybe can reel me back in.
That's something I wanted to mention too, is like that some fandoms are like, so like Marvel, I feel like Marvel is like made up of sub fandoms, and there's some people who like all the Marvel stuff, and there's some people who are going to get actively mad at Miss Marvel because, again, Miss Marvel is for a particular audience. So Iron Man 1 and the Miss Marvel TV show don't actually have maybe the overlap that some people were hoping for.
Oh no, that's a perfect example. What Marvel once was like going full, like breaking down history of once the MCU became a thing. They used a lot of C, B, C, and T tier characters that they still had left to create something that was ubiquitous. But by and large, it was like you had people that knew who Iron Man was, everybody knew who Hulk was, things like that. But you weren't getting, there weren't as many fans of theirs that you were trying to catch. They were just trying to catch a bunch of people on the net. So what MCU has become fully is basically a Disney machine. We just make a bunch of things, whether it's basically single female lawyer, which is now She-Hulk, which is what that show is. I love it. Or
single female lawyer.
Oh, I love it. I love the Futurama reference.
Fighting for her client.
Exactly. Or we can make like super dark stuff, but it's starting to splinter out a little bit more. But there's still a bunch of people that came in when it was the conglomerate. It's like, no, I want to like all of this. And it's like, no, you don't have to now. You can come in, you can come out, get to the big group of team ups. We'll give you the information you need to know to kind of follow it. But now we can splinter off and give individual audiences what they want. But people are still taking it all in. Like, no, I'm supposed to like all of this because your marketing was really effective and told me I can't miss any of it. And now you get people like, why isn't She-Hulk like this, this, and this? It's like, well, actually, She-Hulk is really close to 2 different versions of herself in the comics. You just didn't read She-Hulk comics. Don't lie to me and say you did. You have no idea what's happening.
Yeah.
Reacting to it.
No, they're telling on themselves.
That's a good point. I think
with a lot of these really big fandoms like Marvel, Star Wars, even getting to that point now where there's a lot of people who are newer, but there's so much content that it's very intimidating.
Yes, I watched the Orville, and I never watched Star Trek growing up, but it's interesting if you meander over to that subreddit, you'll see that a large proportion of those fans are Star Trek fans, and so it's interesting because it's like I just like the show because I like it.
It's a funnier Star Trek.
Not because of the other show, but I mean I have no problem watching the other show, but that's kind of my problem with that one is like, well, that's a lot of stuff to go back and watch. I have been told that I don't have to watch it all though for that.
And that's the thing.
I'm sorry, non-tribe. Have you watched DBZ abridged?
Nope.
So it's basically
Funny
like
stuff.
It's all about DBZ, but they did the audio over, like they redubbed it, and it's just a whole bunch of like pop culture like references, like
okay.
but it's still the same show. And for me, the Orville is like the same thing. It's like I could watch Star Trek, but then I could also watch Star Trek that's funny and makes a lot of like comedic jokes, and I it's a little bit lighter. So yeah, I just want to mention that because I do like the Orville, and I'm with you on that one.
I'm gotta head out, guys. So had fun talking.
Thanks for coming out.
Thanks for joining us.
Jose, as we're talking about like that sort of thing, like there's absolutely the space for love letters to fandoms, which is what the Orville is. Like that was Seth MacFarlane saying, "Oh, there isn't like anything that's a classic Star Trek show anymore." There's a bunch of us that still love that, and he made it before like Star Trek Discovery and everything came back out, which is now Star Trek itself trying to recapture that nostalgia, which they eventually got right with. I believe it's Strange New Worlds. I haven't watched that yet, but all my old school Star Trek friends tell me it's essentially old school Star Trek updated. But you can create love letters and referential things that don't require encyclopedic knowledge of what that stuff is. And I think that's what a lot of fandom has turned into. I actually tweeted about this recently, where there's a bunch of people that use the term, "Oh, you're a casual fan." And it used to just mean like, "Oh, you like this, but you're not super duper into it. That's fine. You just like it for what it is." And now it's kind of devolved into meaning you're a casual fan because you don't know episode 3 of season 4 at this timestamp. They did this. I'm like, when did that happen? I just wanted to say I like this thing, but now I gotta pass this written exam to prove to you that I like something. And that's the de-evolution of what fandom has become in my eyes. And it's not, I'm painting with a broad stroke there. That's not everyone, but it's those same people that, to go back to your point before about who are the people talking about it on Reddit? Who are the people talking about it in some of these rooms? It's a lot of those people, because that's where we just established. That's where you can go to find other people that can do that, but they don't realize that it's gatekeeping in that way.
And frankly, I'm at the place. Oh, I'm sorry. Well, I was going to just say I'm at the place now where you're a casual fan, and it's like, yes, I am. I'm going to.
Yeah, right.
I'm actually going to go do something else in the real world after I watch that show, because I mentioned houseplants a bunch of times. I really like houseplants. I'm going to go water my plants and maybe do some landscaping or spend some time with my kids or go on a hike, because that's real life too.
So I want to draw some comparisons and get your feedback on a theory. All right. So Star Wars, I believe yesterday, Disney dropped just a bunch of trailers for a bunch more content that is coming out. Like kind of a ridiculous amount of content. I think they're starting to really get off on that sort of thing. And it seems like Star Trek is having a little bit of a renaissance and getting more shows and more content that way. Meanwhile, I enjoy me some Stargate that I'm sure most people have forgotten about, and it's a much smaller fandom, but they're also somewhat practical. Like they're very well organized. And for instance, they have guides that are like, okay, here's 10 seasons of the original TV show, and we've rated the episodes on what you really need to watch, what you can skip, what you probably want to skip. And they're organized enough to do that, where I think, and it's also a really great way for someone to walk into the fandom and be like, here you go, here's a guide, like a literal guide to, what content is perhaps most worth your time. Whereas I feel like the Star Wars fandom is constantly fighting over their content that such a project could never come to be because they're just too large. So is it possible that a smaller fandom is a better or maybe more efficient fandom?
I wouldn't say it's definitely better. I would say it can pull off things of what you just described. I think a lot of it just has to be allowing people to discover things how they want to discover things. And so, like, I have friends that'll ask me because they know I'm the movie guy and all this stuff. Oh, Troy, what episodes or what show should I watch because the new MCU movie's coming out? And I can be like, look, realistically, just watch this one thing. Like, just watch that as it is. If the movie or show is done well enough, it'll fill you in on the blanks. What you're falling for is the trick of completionism, which a lot of people have, where it's like, oh, you feel like you have to know all this stuff.
You don't get a platinum trophy for watching all the MCU, though. If they did, I think I'd actually go for it, though. This is the next step.
The only thing you get is actual satisfaction of enjoyment from yourself. Like, so I would never tell somebody, hey, watch, because at this point, the MCU is now 30 some odd movies, like 15 different shows, and like a bunch of just other casual movie knowledge. I'm like, I'm not about to tell you to watch thousands of hours of content to watch one movie.
That's getting to the point. You have to ask yourself, which is the bigger time commitment, reading the Bible or watching all of the MCU content, especially if you're willing to say things like, yeah, original Spider-Man and original Blade was also important. You need to watch those too.
I would say they're the basics.
Well, I'll answer your question as well. I think I kind of do lend myself to agreeing with you. I think probably a smaller fandom probably is a little bit better. I kind of just casually looked at my subs that I'm kind of following right now, and it's like, I'm thinking about the ones, I'm just kind of thinking about the ones that are, the conversations are kind of peaceful and nice, and it's like, King of the Hill's not too bad. Twilight Zones. There's a little bit of cognitive dissonance in King of the Hill, but we won't go there right now. But Twilight Zone's kind of cool. It's an older show. Got some reboots. But yeah, I do think the smaller the group of people who are like, I really like this, it probably does lend itself to something a little bit more fun.
I will say on the flip side, not that I'm disagreeing with you at all. I think the flip side is we're saying smaller fan bases, but we have to recognize that a lot of what's happening isn't because it's large fan bases. That's part of it. What we're seeing is splintered fan bases that have all like been there since the beginning. I'm not running into new Star Wars fans or new Marvel fans that are saying, no, this is what it should be. It's still the older fans. They're just a lot of them because it's been around for a while. And now they're arguing amongst themselves. It's just
and they can see the code. Once you've been watching Star Wars or Star Trek enough, you know the code and you can start critiquing. And like we were saying before, sometimes it's better not to see the code.
And they're saying like, oh, well, why isn't it exactly what it used to be 40, 50 years ago? It's like, it shouldn't be. You should want things to change somewhat, to elevate and evolve and that sort of thing. Change isn't necessarily bad, but we all know how people react to change. They think it's inherently evil. But like if you get two Star Wars fans, and I hate that we're picking on them at this point. Like, I see we keep doing that, but if you get two Star Wars fans,
I'm a Star Wars fan. It's okay. I approve this.
But if you get two Star Wars fans that are in their late 30s, mid 40s around that time, so they probably all started watching around the same time, they're going to have not vastly different, but pretty different areas where they splinter on certain things based on whether or not, well, you were a Star Wars fan that read the books, were you a Star Wars fan that played Knights of the Old Republic, and that's where you're getting some of your stuff? Do you still think this thing is canon? It's like, it's not so much that there's too big of an audience. There's just been a whole bunch of stuff, and they're all pulling from different stuff for their genetic makeup of what they think is the real thing. And I'm using air quotes, even though y'all can't see me. And now they're fighting about what the real thing is, while some 14-year-old is just like, nah, fam, I like Finn and Rey. And that's where my baseline is right now. I'm still growing into it, but now I don't want to because y'all are weird. And that's where it starts to happen.
Yeah, I'm with you, but I'll be honest with you, like the last 3 movies, my God, dude, what a mess.
We could say from a film area, they're not great. I am a Last Jedi apologist, though. The second one, I think they were trying something and it got rejected. But I think it's like, let's make this world a little bit bigger, open it up, get it just outside of saying only the Skywalkers and these 3 people with a certain midichlorian count and this bull crap. Like, no, like open it up a little bit. And then that got reverted. So then it made everything of those last 3, like, what did I just watch? So yeah,
that's happened to recant the fan fiction.
Pretty much. That's what they did. The third movie is just basically fan fiction mashed together. It might as well be a Twilight movie.
Somehow Palpatine has returned.
Well, I talked about this with Broclen, and I think Star Wars, there's such a big gap between like the original Star Wars and then like these kind of like sequels or the continuation of the story. And I just think that Star Wars suffers from not having a clear story about what they're writing about. Like I feel like they want to appeal to so many people that they can't just commit to a story or some type of whatever they want to talk about. It's all over the place and it's contradictory. And it leaves people to argue about what it really means.
And I think it's because they were reactionary to quote unquote fans. The example, like people say like, oh, they should have had a plan the whole time. It's like, no, they shouldn't have. The original trilogy didn't, and you love it, you revere it. It is what it is. It's anointed. Not every film series has like a full thought out plan through and through. Like you kind of adjust, you fix things based on how one, people are reacting, but two, like, oh yeah, we missed something here. Let's fix that in the next few movies. What happened is in between every movie, they were reacting to quote unquote fan outreach and backlash, sorry. But all the fans were saying different things. It's like when Homer Simpson was trying to build a car for his brother in that season. He was like, I just want all this stuff in it. And then you get that monstrosity at the end. It's like,
yes.
You didn't make anything specific. Everybody in your factory was making a car.
Yeah, he's killing the references, man. You've killed you. That's like number 10 or something. You're dropping dimes, Chris Paul. You got some hands up down there. I just wanted to point that out. So I don't know if people in the down there had some things to say.
Yeah, they seem to come and go quickly.
The last
I wanted to mention
made reference to Conor McGregor, so I stopped letting. So I just accepted the raise hand.
So I wanted to mention The Simpsons because I feel like The Simpsons was the first and maybe the only media that became a language. That I watched The Simpsons. No one could stop me from watching The Simpsons. I had VHS recordings of The Simpsons because I knew which episodes I liked, and I read the TV guide. So a little bit of planning, did a lot of work.
You say no one can stop you as if there was an actual effort for people to hold you back. That's enough Simpsons today.
Oh no, I was very wise that if my parents didn't know I watched something, they could never disapprove of me watching it. So an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, and a lot of kids were not allowed to watch The Simpsons. But when I was in third grade, I met a new group of friends, and they were watching the same time as I was watching, and being close to New York helped. I feel like we got a little extra Simpsons dosing because you can pick up New York's Fox stations. And then again, when I was in college, that a lot of people were it just became its own language. I was saying boo earns. So I feel like that's a level of fandom that I feel like the closest thing Star Wars has had to that is prequel memes, but that's just a circle jerk of quotes. Like The Simpsons is mostly deep cuts.
Yes,
you hit a point. No, my bad. Go ahead, Don Trapp.
No, I was gonna say you're absolutely right. Very quick statement here. Like 3 weeks ago, my 50-year-old Black, probably late baby boomer pastor made a Simpsons reference in his sermon. I mean, you're right. It's a language.
Oh, that's beautiful. I wish I could have been there for that.
It was great. It was glorious.
You hit on a great point in that as certain things, because we've hit on like a lot of the big major fandoms that have been around for 30, 40, 50 years at this point. A lot of it is those people that consider themselves fans can all speak the same language. And now that language is changing. And even if you take it outside of fandom, like that's a visceral human reaction, period. Like the reason, yes, it's racism, but the reason a lot of people react untowardly when people speak a different language in front of them is because our brain doesn't like it. Our brain doesn't like to hear something that's in Spanish when you don't speak Spanish because it rings a danger alarm on some subconscious level that if you work on, it doesn't happen anymore. You're just like, oh, people just speak a different language, whatever. But when it comes to fandoms, it's like, no, I used to be able to speak to all these people because we all knew the same thing, this one specific way. And now these TikTokers are talking about it a different way. This subgroup is talking about it a different way, but we're all talking about Star Wars. No, we're not. We're all talking about Simpsons. No, we're not. We're all talking, it's like, wait, you're not talking about my Simpsons. You're not talking about, and it reverts back to the individual. You're not talking about my fandom the way that I do it. So it ain't right. And that's where you start to see some of those internal clashes. And sometimes that stuff lashes out. And that's where you get the casual stuff. It's like, oh, you don't know what you're talking about. You're just a casual. You only came in 10 years ago. It's like, well, what's the cutoff for casual then? If 10 years don't get me into the real club.
Hey
Yeah,
man,
I think
I've
there's
seen
a
that kind of
difference.
gatekeeping in churches where, oh, you're not third generation. Well, you're new church, not
Yup.
legacy church, so you don't
Right.
really count.
I think there's
You're
maybe a
And then
Southern
they
difference.
say,
Baptist. You're
wait, where
not
did
real
everyone go?
Baptist.
Why are we empty? Oh, right.
Yep.
I think there's maybe a difference between like old school, new school fans and maybe the fair weather fans. I find a lot of those, especially in like the anime community. I mean, those that come along because they've heard from a friend that this or that's a big thing, and they watch that and they come into the community and don't really want to stick around, but are just there because they feel pressured to because of their slight interest in one or two shows. So I mean, maybe make a bad name for themselves. I mean, I don't think it's so bad in the anime community as far as like the old guard and the new guard, but the Fairweathers are kind of a little bit universally hated in that fandom because it is kind of like the normie thing, but like, fucking hell, this normie's only going to be around 5 minutes. Don't bother talking to him.
Well,
That's
I
a
got
great.
to ask then, well, I have to ask in that regard, how do you get new fans then? Because I know when I'm learning about something new, I'm not about to go whole hog every time. Like, oh, I liked one episode of the show. I'm a fan of it. Like, I need something to keep me around. And if people are telling me, like, oh, we know you're not going to stick around, you don't really care about it that much, like, well, I do want to watch it, but y'all are kind of asses. Like,
I
that's
have a
like, where do
perfect
you
example
separate
for
that?
this. I have a
Okay.
perfect example. And we touched on Tolkien earlier, but Lord of the Rings just had their new TV show start. And a lot of people within that fandom were critical from the get-go just by looking at some of the trailers and advertising media and casting. So, I don't know that everyone there was giving it a fair shake. But there's, I'm watching Lord of the Rings memes, and there's still this. There was a GIF based on the movies, basically making the argument like, if you don't like it, just don't watch it, and sort of acknowledging that the fandom has been just fine before there were movies even. So if it's not good, like the Russian version of Lord of the Rings or what, like there's a lot of weird bad versions of Lord of the Rings out there that are worth ignoring or not culturally relevant to you. So but then the question becomes, well, if we aren't going to watch the new media and it's not going to be part of the tradition, then how do we get new fans? Do we get new fans, or are we, old school versus new school fans with a hard line in between?
No, I mean, there's always going to be a steady stream of fans into whatever fandom it is. It's just like those that are actually interested in being there, or those that are, I don't know, maybe interested in what's going on right now. I mean, I got a lot of friends that I've tried to introduce to anime a lot of times, and they're crap because they're not very receptive. I've tried to introduce them to like Serial Experience Lane and like Ninja Scroll and kind of the really good stuff, the stuff that people like swoon over, Trigun and Cowboy Bebop, the stuff that old weebs get fucking boners for,
Okay, you just named
Art
a
is
bunch of my
weird.
favorite. You
Art
just
is
named a
weird.
bunch of my favorite anime stuff, but you also just named a bunch of stuff from like the same window of time.
Yes.
So I would ask you if you could, and this is me speaking from my professional side because this is what I kind of do for a living. You have to find people where they are. So if somebody's like, "Oh, I like this one thing," this what as it is right now. Now, I guess my best analogy for it is like if I'm introducing somebody to a band because they liked one song by that band, and they're like, "Oh, that one song is dope." I'm like, "All right, cool. Well, here's a few other songs by that same band that sound like that one song. Now let's build from there. Like, all right, now here's a few songs from that same band that came out recently that I still like, maybe a little bit less than the stuff I found when I was like 13. And then you go for like, so you give the barrier of entry, but you still meet them where they are. You don't want to be like, oh, you like anime. Here's all the cool stuff from when I was 13 because you have all those barriers of either time, whether it fits, like even if it is still good, it might still hold up to you, but it might not hold up overall. Like I love Ninja Scroll. Ninja Scroll's got some issues. Like, you can't give Ninja Scroll to everybody.
I have a coworker, and she's like into food, and I was like, "Oh, do you like anime?" She's like, "Oh, I watch a couple of them." I was like, "Watch Food Wars." It's like Food War. I don't know if anyone else has seen Food Wars, but it's pretty much like it's like Battle School, but they cook dishes instead and have like orgasms over the food. It's like a ridiculous show, but like, and it's not like a show that I would say is like in the greatest of animes, but it's like that niche thing, of like those different sub anime genres that I feel like are better ids than like just telling them what the great ones are. Like, there's slice of life, there's sports ones,
And that's my point. It's like we get to the point where we're now like, oh, here's the stuff we think you should see. But you got to remember, like, through our own biases and prisms, it might not fit for everybody, but it fit for us. And we're thinking somebody's going to have that same reaction. And not saying that's what you do every time, Cool Angel. Like, I ain't putting that on you. But I'm just saying, like,
I'm quite happy to meet people on their level in their fandom. That's perfectly fine. I'm suggesting other things, but a lot of people aren't interested in going back and looking into what kind of got them there. As most people know, like, anime has been part of the more media zeitgeist for the last 15, 20 years, from being on things like, HBO. And but by the way, I never had that. I'm English. We had it all on the Sci-Fi Channel at like fucking 9 o'clock at night. That's how people started to.
Ooh.
Yeah. I mean, I got into it via VHS, like, by accident when I was 7, and I've been collecting it ever since.
Nice.
I think my overall point, and again, not saying like what you do is right or wrong, like, no, that's what I'm saying. I think we just have to avoid, as fans of certain things, immediately assigning people history lessons as happiness. Like, yo, here's a bunch of homework because you said you like something. Like, you can't do that to people.
It's more or less a suggestion. It's, you like this, so you might like this. But
that's fine. Yeah, that's what I mean. Like, that's cool.
But they are not so receptive because, there's obviously a clear divide in between the older style of anime. If you look at like Attack on Titan and look at Ninja Scroll side by side, you can clearly tell one is 20 years older than the other. There's quite a clear division. And people see it as, oh, it's old-fashioned, gross, I don't want to watch that. But I find, actually, for me, like, the quality of the anime is so much better because it's hand-animated and it's maybe not quite as fluid as the newer stuff, but there's so much more character because all the CGI stuff is starting to look really similar.
Really samey. No, I get
Are you watching these shows with these people?
I'm trying to, yeah.
Because I would say, I would like, Broclen and non-tribe, because I think you guys both say having children, like passing your fandoms on to your kids. Like, I love watching wrestling with my children, and sometimes they're interested and sometimes they're not. But when they're interested, like, I'm with them. Like, we're here together watching this. And then and I let them walk away, and do their thing. But they know that's something I love.
It's also fair to acknowledge that technological jumps can make for barriers. In the example I have for this is, I remember in the mid 90s, late 90s, right around when they stopped doing it, where they were boomers were remastering every bit of music they could get their freaking hands on from when they were kids. So we were getting Beatles remastered, Stones remastered, like all back to Elton John, everything back to back to back. And the reason they were doing that is because they were trying to introduce new generations to the music, and it all sounded like crap. Like, just complete and utter garbage because they hadn't remastered it since the 50s, 60s, and 70s. So there was that effort to try and put that into, like, all right, we know you're not going to accept it just because it sounds old. Same thing with movies. I know people that don't watch certain movies before like the 70s just because they look and feel ancient, even if they're not. Like, there's no remaster of Ghostbusters that makes it look better. So it's going to be really hard to get generations currently to watch old Ghostbusters, no matter how much people in this room might think it is perfect, reverential.
It's perfect.
Blasphemy.
But you know what looks like trash right now on my 75-inch 4K TV? Original 84 Ghostbusters. And it's one of my favorite movies ever. God. But I get why people wouldn't want to watch it. So it's certain things you have to do on our end to kind of usher people into fandom and get them into the more deeper character sides, if you want to show those things. But just the way things make their first example is going to be a part of that. And sometimes it can be superficial and you can think it sucks, because I agree, but I can't ignore that that's what it is. Because I know freaking well, as much as I love movies and I would watch them with my parents and my grandparents, we're like, oh, Troy, you like these movies. Let's watch this Western from the 40s that's in black and white and super grainy. You can barely hear all of this. Like,
I think that's a big reason why I'm very
right, but like I couldn't watch it at the time because my brain just wouldn't accept that random etch-a-sketch of a movie.
I think that's one reason why I'm not critical of all of the Star Wars stuff, because I find it pretty easy to tell what's for me and what's not. And I'm surprised because it seems like, especially with the dropping of all the trailers yesterday, that most of it is for me. That if it isn't Rey and Finn and BB-8 or Baby Yoda, she's not really that interested. So like I show her all the parts with Baby Yoda. Like she gets the abridged version. And I just like try to find the episodes or scenes with the stuff that she's interested in. And, you know, we'll see where it goes from there. But like she's not gonna watch Andor. She isn't interested in most of Kenobi either. I think what made it a bit interesting to her was Princess Leia. But she would go and come back from it, and like that's fine.
And I do think this is separate from what we were talking about in terms of like introducing people to things. But I do think there's an acknowledgement of like not when you discover something initially, beyond when you were like 12, 13, when we were super impressive, super excited about everything we found. But as you find things, you latch onto individual parts and hope from there that you grow. Like it's kind of like dating. Like when you meet somebody now, it's like, all right, you're cute. Are you funny? Oh, you're funny. All right, now just don't say anything stupid. Okay, you're not saying anything stupid. And you just kind of build until you're eventually accepting all of what this person is. But now there's this weird expectation. It's like, oh, you said you like this one thing. You need to like all of this thing. It's like, that's not how anybody operates, fans.
Sounds like a proselytization effort. You watched it. You must now join the club. You must join our political party. Yes, one of us.
Oh, that's it. I mean, I know I've mentioned like the clear divide in animation several times, and I know it sounds like I'm a dog with a bone, but you know, there is a division, as you know, and it's harder to get people back into watching the classics. Obviously, it's been pushed a lot more. Netflix has obviously had a big push in it with things like Neon Genesis Evangelion, which, oh, wow.
My first anime. That was my first one. Yeah, I discovered on my own.
Masterpiece. Fucking masterpiece. For the record, my first anime was New Dominion Tank Police.
I mean, for going that route, I'll be the one, because we just mentioned this several times. My first anime was Ninja Scroll because I had one of those uncles, the cool uncle. It's like, oh, you like cartoons? Let's watch this one. 10-year-old me should not have been watching Ninja Scroll.
Oh no, I remember the stone monster that. Yeah. Wow. Like, dude, I watched that probably roughly the same age. Nah, I mean, after watching that, I went on to watch an anime called Urotsuki Daio, which, if you know about it, it's basically just full of monsters, gore, and rape. It's really fucked up.
Like, we gotta get that on a T-shirt that only very specific people wear. Monsters gone rape.
I feel like anime is one of those things that's, you know, particularly difficult to introduce people to. And I was under the impression that for a while anime didn't really have a positive reputation in Japan either. But isn't that where the term normie originally comes from? Like someone who's just too normal to appreciate anime the way the more refined non-normies are. I don't know. That doesn't sound right.
So we're talking about the difference between normies and weebs.
I can only speak to it again from the pop culture historian side of things. It's largely because anime is so much of a freaking catch-all term at this point. Like it literally just used to mean Japanese animation. Like that was just the style of animation from that.
Japanimation. That's
all it meant. And then now because people still use it that way, it fits everything that comes out, whether it's the bubbly stuff for kids or monsters go on rape. Like nobody differentiates what any of that stuff is. It's just all anime, which can make it harder to talk about to people. Because like, oh, you like anime? You like the stuff with the tentacles. It's like, no, that's a different thing. I like.
It's a blanket term. It's a blanket term for something. The same as saying like, oh, I like a comedy. Yeah, well, there's dry comedy, there's fart comedy, slapstick, and all that.
It's hard. It's hard to explain how compartmentalized genres are in animes too. Like if I would say like a slice of life anime, it's like a lot of people wouldn't even know what that means, and it's totally different from like a giant mech anime.
Yeah. Oh, dude, not gonna lie. I love when we get kind of like the crossovers, like Macross being a big one. Kind of did a bit of both, you know, slice of life, romance, mecha. Fucking masterpiece, dude. Okay, like it come out in what, 1984 or 5? It looks ancient now, but holy shit!
I'm actually realizing we've kind of come full circle back to what we were talking about before about how like the MCU now represent so much stuff that they can dabble in different things, but everybody's still accepting it as the catch-all term. Like, and that's again what creates some fandom clashes. And I remember when I brought this up to talk about is because a lot of that stuff was just popping up from She-Hulk, where she had the Meg Thee Stallion cameo, and people were upset. It's like, oh, they got She-Hulk.
I had no clue
Stallion.
Megan Thee Stallion was real. So when I was like, people are mad about Megan Thee Stallion, it's like, what the heck? That character seemed like pretty entertaining, but we only saw her for a few minutes. They're like, no, she's real. I'm like, what? Okay, so now I don't know the difference between reality and fiction anymore.
No, and for me, it's like I'm speaking as a heterosexual black male that grew up in the U.S. Like the fact that one of the biggest rappers in the world is throwing cheeks on a Disney Channel show, essentially, I thought that was dope. I'm like, we made it.
That is funny when you put it down.
Entire lives. And people are complaining about it. They're like, well, this shouldn't be an MCU show. And they were putting it juxtaposed with like the one of the last scene or the ending of Act 1 in Iron Man, where the scientist dies. He's like, hey, make sure you earn a good life. And I'm like, yeah, that was a great endearing moment in that movie. But like we already pointed out, that movie also had them listening to Ghostface Killer and playing with strippers. Like we can't act like the MCU has always been this super serious thing. It's like, no, it's comic books. It's shooty, bang, bang fantasies. So yeah, She-Hulk in her comics does stuff like dance around with people like Meg Thee Stallion. That should be in the show as well, in my interpretation. That's not something to complain about. But the real fans were, no, that's not how she should look. And it's like, well, now, one, you're lying. Two, why are you taking good things from us? Because that was fun. That was a good time. Why do you not want that?
Do you think it's partly cultural? Like, do you think there's the old timey rapist crap crowd out there that's just mad at it from that angle? And I'm sure plenty of Christian moms are like, no one should be shaking their booty, whether they're black or white or green. I don't care. No booty shaking. That's not my position, but Christian moms are thinking that.
I'm sure that is totally part of it. You can't ever write those people off and say like they don't exist, because we know they do. I was there through the 90s when rappers crap to everybody, and they weren't playing Left Eye's rapping verse on No Scrubs on the radio. Like, I remember all this stuff.
Right.
But my thing is, that's not who I'm hearing popping up in my echo chambers of social media. I'm seeing people that essentially, for lack of a better term, look like me. They're around my age. I thought we grew up watching the same stuff and liked the same thing, and we were the same amount of counterculture. But they all turn to Puritans clutching their pearls because somebody that this specific version of the thing isn't what they want.
Won't someone please think of the children?
Like some people still want Axl Rose popping up on their TV shows to be the version of counterculture. It's like, yo, Axl Rose is like in his 60s. He's like 10 faceless in. You wouldn't recognize him if he popped up anyway. This is what counterculture, quote unquote, looks like. Even though that term, it still exists, but it's not what it used to be, because counterculture now is like, oh, we just want to take it over. We want ourselves represented, whether you like us here or not. And that's what somebody like Meg Thee Stallion represents for me. And seeing her on a show like She-Hulk, which is on Disney, that's all encompassing for me. So I guess like what I'm saying is like, I feel like a lot of what happens in fandoms when they're speaking out loudly and vocally, it's like that old quote about how like Henry Ford asked a bunch of people what they wanted and they all said a faster horse, so he created a car. Like, that quote has been debunked as never actually happening, but it still holds true. A lot of fandoms don't really know what they want, because if you let them decide, they get the same thing over and over again and they hate it. It was called freaking that first Star Wars movie that just came out. Like, what you want to do is create something and be like, hey, you guys like that, right? We're going to try and create more of it, as opposed to we want to create by your committee. You don't want to listen to the peanut gallery specifically, but we'll listen to your reactions after the fact. And it sounds like the fandoms are becoming the guys like, no, we want to be there at the beginning. We want to curate, create, and make the things that you then give to us instead of creating it in some way ourselves.
Movies are not.
That's why I love wrestling.
Of fans.
That's why I love wrestling. They intentionally piss you off. They don't care. They do it on purpose. They know you're hooked.
Okay, I have an out of the loop question. A lot of people have been saying that Vince McMahon is not a good dude, and I've known this for a very long time. But why specifically now in the WWE? What did he do?
Well, Vince McMahon has had VIP seats in hell for a very long time.
Vince McMahon's old carny. He's a carny. So he's as good as a person as like an old carny can be.
Now, wait, we got a hand raised. Oh, I think if you want to take this one, go ahead and go for it.
Oh, who, me?
No, somebody was it? I don't know. I'm not going to try to
Say
butcher
raise
it.
your hand.
Ed, go for it.
Oh, yeah.
Just a stoic upvote.
That's fine. No, but what I was going for is like what's happening right now. If people are unaware, is basically it was found out that Vince McMahon was doing old nasty billionaire things, and he was basically having sexual encounters with people that he employed for WWE. But he was also using company funds to do it. Like some people he had given jobs, which shady and kind of terrible, but when we understand that kind of happens. But he was also lying about how much the company was making to then pay certain people off to keep them quiet. So once that sort of information came to light, since WWE is a publicly traded company, the higher ups were like, you can't be here. Now, before that fully came to fruition, he was basically he was coming out live, like right after the allegations and the stories were coming out. He would come out live after not being on TV for years at a time to basically pulse check the audience to see if they would boo him, and would come out and be like, hey, you guys are still here. You still like me, right? Clap. Yay. And then disappear back into nothingness. And more people were like, that's just gross and ugly. You can't manipulate your audience like that, but also showing that how gleefully people will just ignore large acts of sexual misconduct from a CEO. So eventually he retired, quote unquote. Basically, he got ousted. His son-in-law and his daughter are taking over. But yeah, that's basically what has been happening around Vince McMahon, where people are like, "Oh no, you are kind of gross, aren't you?" It's like we've all known this. We figured this is going on behind the scenes.
Right. This all
anyway.
feels
been the
very
culture.
on brand.
Yeah.
Not shocked.
That's been the culture for as long as it's been the culture. How it's been.
It's one of those things where it's like no one was really shocked, but it's like, oh, you were really being a nasty boy out there. Okay, now we got documentation on it. So it was one of those situations.
Well, thank you for putting me back in the loop. Hey, you want to introduce yourself, Edo Quinn?
Yes, sir. You may or may not know me. I'm in the secret Discord. Click on my profile, you'll see my full name. Yeah, man. I was told this was a safe space, even for those who are not brothers in Christ. So I'm here.
Well, welcome, Ed. I would say I was invited here. I am only a brother in Christ, according to Twitter, when I say something crazy. So I am with you on the same page.
My brother in Christ. You're on Twitter?
Exactly.
As am I. But I'm not always, I'm pontificating, but I'm not always going out with the hot takes. I'm actually saying things that are defensible the vast majority of the time, if not all the time. But yeah.
No, we're right. I try not to operate on hot take currency. Like, I feel like that's a really weird way to exist. Like, either you say something you stand on or you don't. Like, I'm not trying to say anything to rile people up. That's how I get down. And I found to be very successful in my spaces when I do it that way. So who knows?
Exactly.
So we don't have to take the Skip Bayless model to live in.
Yes. Or Steven, let's be honest, both of them. But yeah,
True.
for sure. For sure. And I didn't want to even, I know what, I realize now, I wasn't trying to accuse you of that. I know you didn't take it that way, so good. But like, yeah, I think what people dislike about Twitter is more like the bad actors in the space, which is basically what people don't dislike about anything. We don't like salesmen because of bad salesmen. We don't like fucking crypto because of bad crypto bros. But there's all kinds of good actors in any space if you're just like willing to take a look and be nuanced and open-minded.
Actually, Ed, I'm glad you said that, because that's my stance on fandoms. I know we're talking about this, and a lot of this sparked from just bad reactions to fandoms. Actually, a huge part of this is our right after the Lord of the Rings series premiered. I want to say it was right after the second episode. Amazon went out of their way to release a statement saying, "Hey, we accept fans from all races, creeds, genders," and they had to do that. And I recognize, like, that's like the fifth time a major billion-dollar company has had to say that. Disney had to say it for Obi-Wan. I think they had to say it for like some Star Wars stuff. Like, there's a bunch of shows that have come out.
Is it because fans were suggesting otherwise? What's prompting these statements?
No, what's been happening is the bad fandoms have been popping up and saying all the race stuff, like elves can't be black women, or they shouldn't, like she shouldn't be this powerful, and this person shouldn't be this, and this woman's a Mary Sue, and this character is blah blah blah. Basically, just saying if any major character that's strong, powerful, prominent, etc., is there because of affirmative action. Like, that's the only reason these characters exist, and not that was the natural. Yeah,
that was the fandom menace stuff too. That Kathleen
that's a bad thing.
Was being a social justice warrior in her art for some reason.
And heck, I would say technically they are quote unquote there because of affirmative action, but it's only because of a lack of representation so far. And I've been loving the reactions.
But
like,
they're
listen,
doing it because it's profitable, not because it's the right thing to do. It's not like they actually care. I don't. That's my interpretation. Maybe that's my hot take. I'm sorry.
In some cases, honestly, you could go either way. I would say they probably do or don't care. I actually don't care if they do or don't care, as long as this is where that old stance comes in. As long as the product I'm getting at the end is still good. When I'm watching House of the Dragon, when I'm watching the Lord of the Rings show, when I'm watching these shows that have all these characters in, it's like, oh, well, there's no black people in Middle Earth. Like, well, how do you know that? Africa not in Middle Earth either. Like, where does it say it's only white people? But as long as the show I'm watching at the end still good, we're Gucci. I don't care. But they're not even acknowledging that the show themselves are still good. And then when they're not good, they're using that as the impetus for why they're not. That is why they're saying, oh, it's bad because they did this thing. It's like, oh, no, the show is just kind of bad and they happen to be a black person this time.
Which is interesting because as a black person, for the history of media, you normally are on the other side of that continuum. So it's a very, you like the show despite, so
the fact that we've been outside the club forever.
Yeah. I enjoy, I enjoyed Better Call Saul, or I enjoy all these different shows, or I enjoyed Twilight Zone. I mean, yeah, there's no black people, but I still like it. So it's very interesting, or very few.
Bringing that up and then watching people short circuit, it's like, well, I've been a black kid my entire life, and very few things have people that look like me until recently, and I still like those things. So why don't you like other things? And then watching them try to figure out the reverse racism answer to that question makes me laugh every time I do it.
Right. So I just said earlier how much I like King of the Hill. I mean, come on. I mean, like I said.
I have a nuanced take on this.
The rumor is all of Texas likes King of the Hill. I don't know if that's true.
Recently moved to Texas, King of the Hill is a documentary. That holy crap, that show is
pretty much.
Right. So I have a nuanced take on this.
The interesting thing culturally, though, I was talking to my father-in-law, who is like from Puerto Rico, moved here from Puerto Rico, and we were talking about how the show Everybody Loves Raymond is basically about his life. Like, he has two parents. He has an older brother who's like a lot bigger than him, and like kind of like behaves like him. It's like you can have these, like, they're different cultures, different races, but like the stories are still the same. And then we were kind of talking about sitcoms in general, how like, you can change, people's like, color or culture, whatever, but a lot of those family dynamics, those stories still kind of play out the same. So it's like, as far as representation, what are you looking for? When you're kind of like when you're asking for it.
Okay. May I say something?
Go for that. Sorry.
It's all good. It's always good to be mindful of, like, I know some people have their phones in their pockets or whatever, but be mindful of someone like unmuting themselves or trying to speak and giving them a chance to actually say their piece. I have a nuanced take on this. And like, when you heard me say when you said like, they're still good. Are they still good though? That's the thing. Like, your point, like, if they're still good, who cares, is true. And the thing is, I think, honestly, a lot of people looking at these things objectively, keyword, or at least trying, have said that Obi-Wan ain't that good. Actually, it's got some good parts, but it's got a lot of problems. Same
I
with
think a lot of people think Obi-Wan wasn't good compared to Episode 3 because it's not Episode 3.
I think, comparing. I mean, a movie to a TV show, and like, this versus that, and 10 years later, blah blah blah. Okay,
and I want to let you finish your thought, but I agree with what you're saying, but I want to let you like flesh it all the way out. Go ahead.
Thank you. If I may, just I take feedback, but let me just I get through this. I promise it won't be like a 5-minute monologue. But yeah, it's like, that's the thing. The jury is out. Let's put it that way, on whether these things are good. The jury is out on whether Obi-Wan is or was good. The jury is out on whether House of Dragon is good, on whether the non-Silmarillion inspired, explicitly non-Silmarillion inspired. I keep throwing that out there because that's important. I'm not even a big Lord of the Rings head, but the people who are is like, wait a minute, you're not gonna use the Silmarillion as a baseline at all, really? The non-Silmarillion inspired, Lord of the Rings prequel. The jury is out on whether or not that's good. And so my whole thing is like, make it good. The jury is out on like whether like modern Star Wars stuff is good. And also, Lando, Mace, a number of Asian characters, or Asian coded characters. There's been diversity in Star Wars from the jump. So I kind of called bullshit on the thing. And I mean, no disrespect to her, but like the thing that the actress said of like, yeah, we're finally bringing diversity to Star Wars. No, you're bringing more diversity, fair enough, but you're not finally bringing diversity to Star Wars because it's always fucking been there. And I think people respond to that. It's like, all right, that statement shows me that you don't actually know what you're talking about. So some people got in their fifis about that, and I understand it. And some people were like really shitty about that. But at the same time, it's kind of a shitty statement. So yeah, that's kind of my nuanced take on all this.
I'm not so interested in whether or not something is good. I'm interested in whether or not it is enjoyable. And I think the debate over whether or not something is good is like literary critique of like books. Sure, you can do that in English class, but the most of us aren't in English class. We're looking for entertainment. So, whether or not you're entertained by something, I think is a much bigger... I've never been someone to defend Star Wars as good in any of its trilogies, in any of its incarnations. But I will tell you, I enjoy it, and people I know enjoy it. And I don't know if we're all having
actually, to back you up, Ido, on your whole representation diverse thing, I actually agree a lot with that. Because like when it comes to characters in Star Wars, like Lando and Mace, like they were there from the beginning. Hell, Leia, or Carrie Fisher playing Leia, she's one of my favorite fictional characters. And here we are in today's age, being like, oh, we're being more diverse. And I'm like, no, you're not. No, you're not. You made these characters good in the past before. All you have to do is just make them a good character. And I feel like your take is definitely right in saying that don't say we're being more diverse just because we're hiring non-white actors. By the way, I am Black, so I feel like I'm worthy enough to speak on this, even though my avatar is white. But I just really like white people's stories, so leave me alone. But I do agree with what you're saying in that, don't make a character and say they're good just because they're diverse. Make a character good no matter the fact that they're diverse. And again, I feel like this falls into Star Wars as well. Star Wars has been doing this well over 40 years. And I don't know why they feel the need to keep announcing it with everything they make, with every new thing they make.
I can actually answer all of those. So the thing about the characters you brought up, specifically in those spacings, Lando Calrissian, Mace Windu. One, Billy D. Williams, constant in my house because, grew up around Black folks in the 80s and 90s. Colt 45 commercials were running all the goddamn time. But he was still essentially a space pimp in only one of Black person. So part of the diversity isn't so much that they are just there. It is what they are representing and what they are allowed to do. Like it was so bad for Lando Calrissian that he's literally wearing Han Solo's clothes at one point. Like he's not really his own character for certain parts of it. Not disagreeing with what you're saying. Like, yes, make the characters good, diversity will follow. But there were very pigeonholed positions where people were allowed to play. So then you fast forward literally 27 years to when you get Mace Windu. It's like, oh, cool, a more prominent African-American character who isn't explicitly a 70s representation of what an African-American is, ironically played by Samuel L. Jackson, who played Shaft like a year later. That's just hilarious to me. But that's where those things come from. So, yes, Star Wars has always had a level of diversity in it, but it wasn't necessarily like, quote-unquote, good. It was of era diversity. It was what they could get away with at the time. So much so that they still had super stereotypical versions of other types of ethnicities. Like the depictions of Jewish caricatures in Star Wars has always been abysmal. Like to accents, the fact that they're like shady and bad with money, like all that sort of stuff. And like that's something that Star Wars has always had to wear. That's something that George Lucas has to wear. Fast forwarding to outside of Star Wars and what we're talking about today, don't just start throwing people in there like, oh, we need to have a Black person, we need to have an Asian person, we need to have this type of woman, you have a trans person. It's like, no, write good characters, and hopefully, as long as the story background doesn't necessitate a person of that cloth playing it, anybody should be able to get plugged in. And that's what I'm enjoying more now with these things, that whether or not, like what Broclen said, screw good. But I use that term interchangeably with entertainment, but I mostly mean entertaining. Am I being entertained by the thing that I watch and having those depictions of other races, ethnicities, genders, whatever? Are those depictions distracting? To me, they are not. Seeing Black people in House of the Dragon playing Targaryens doesn't distract me at all. It's like, no, this is just good actors doing their thing. Same thing with trans, with all these things. I do think there is an issue with overall entertainment quality, separate from fandoms, and only that so many places are now just content farms and they're pumping stuff out because they know we're going to watch it regardless. And now people get to act in bad faith and say that the arguments for why they don't like it is because of the diversity. It's like, no, this thing has legitimate things you can pick apart. That other stuff has nothing to do with it. And if you can't stand on that and say that, then I tend to tune those arguments out. So when people are going on 5-hour-long diatribes on YouTube about why certain movies or shows are bad because of their diversity, I'm like, clearly you're just trying, you're not even blowing the racist dog whistle. Like, you are flat out getting a bullhorn and saying, yo, I'm racist. Like, that's where I draw the line. But I agree with what you're saying. Like, no, the characters and everything are written as well. And if there is actual diversity, kudos, hats off, do what you got to do. But Star Wars wasn't always super diverse. They were just like, we can kind of get away with this in 1979 and then in 81. And then like, and they just kind of kept like the game of racism life. Nobody wins. We just do a little bit better. And that's what LucasArts has been doing for a very long time. Just doing slightly better.
Unless you count aliens and droids as diversity.
Oh, that's a whole different story.
Well, yeah, so I mentioned the coders.
Actually, not talking about the aliens and droids, but back on what you were saying about like Star Wars always being diverse, it actually reminded me of like when the sequel trilogy was coming out and people didn't like Rey as a character, and everyone's like, "Oh, you just don't like it because she's female." And what's so funny is that Clone Wars season 7 came out like a couple months after episode 9, and who was a fan favorite from that show? A female character. And it's so funny because like she was not even like created by Disney, but everyone like loves her so much. And I'm like, you see, it's not even like about the gender, it's about the way you write that character. No one liked Rey because clearly there was no plan for those movies and everyone just kept jumbling her up. But for Ahsoka, it was a clear-cut story for her and everyone enjoyed it because at the very least we could make sense of her journey.
But Ahsoka was playing a role under Obi-Wan and Anakin, essentially. That she was a secondary character, whereas Rey is up front.
We are way more accepting of secondary diverse.
The last few episodes with her was just her alone. It was basically her own story, really.
But what was her placement within the overall show? She's not the lead. It's still Obi-Wan.
There was awesome stuff with Ahsoka at the end of Clone Wars, and one of my favorite things is the episode 3 Clone Wars sort of intercut thing. That's great. But Ahsoka started from very humble beginnings. I like her. I think she's great. My daughter likes her as well. But when she first started out in that very first Clone Wars movie, oof, that was a rough time. So it took them a while to get there with Ahsoka.
There's also a little bit of leeway we can give to depictions in books, just basically long form storytelling that we can't really give to movies. And that's what gets a lot of blowback for any character, but specifically like just women. That's why you get the Mary Sue crap thrown around. It's like, oh, they were too good too fast. Like, yo, we got 90 minutes. It's like you got to get good at some point. But I get what you're saying.
Yeah, but like even if like we're to draw the attention away from Ahsoka, like even Leia, as I mentioned, she's one of my favorite fictional characters out there, and it's not even like she's too good too fast. I feel like at the very least they gave time for her to be a stronger character, and you can't really say she's under Luke or Han because clearly even in the first Star Wars movie, she was just trumping over them with like her smugness and whatnot.
And how did people react when she Mary Poppins herself back to life in The Last Jedi?
We're not talking about those movies. We do not talk about those movies.
The original trilogy. He's talking about the original, not the sequel. But listen.
I'm talking about the episode 4 through 6. We don't talk about 7 through 9.
But I'm just bringing up that point. When that level of power is shown by somebody that should technically have it, even 40 years later, the reaction is still, wait, how is she able to do that?
So the reaction to the reaction to potentially bad writing is the reaction to potentially bad writing. But anyway, to also offer a counter of sorts, I will just throw out Sandman, a show that I had my own reservations to, based off of the casting, based off of the promos, based off of this, based off of that. But it was a good show. It was a arguably great show and a very well written show. And I think to some extent, due respect to you, Broclen, we're talking about distinctions that are different when we say that this was good, but it wasn't good, or it was entertaining, but it wasn't good, or it was fun, but it was, like, listen, that also is kind of like gatekeeping thinking, gatekeeping language. I want Spider-Man No Way Home to win a fucking Oscar, not because like I think it's the best movie ever, but because we need to be able to say this thing that we all liked and that we all think was good and that we all went to actually see rather than and see on our own rather than being told to see it as homework, like a lot of Oscar movies are, that should be held up as the platonic ideal. You shouldn't have this thing of like, well, one thing is popcorn and one thing is actual art. Like, no, I hate that. I'm sorry, it's bullshit. Things
No,
that are
I
great
agree
should be
with you
great.
100%. But
Thank you.
unfortunately,
King.
Spider-Man falls under the Superman thing, and some people think that
Yes, no,
superheroes
I
are
know.
cinema.
I know, but that's why I'm saying like distinction not a difference if we're going to achieve the platonic ideal, as Lord, paraphrasing her, might say, pop music that has some depth to it is the platonic ideal. That is what we're striving for. There's a value to the popular stuff that also has depth and is also, again, platonically
I really
good.
am not following you on this platonic ideal stuff. I think you're
making the
overcomplicating
point.
what is a pretty simple statement that, yeah, you can sit here and say this is the hero's journey or a platonic ideal or dark versus light paradigm or whatever. But at the end of the day, I'm eating it in a chair watching popcorn for 2 hours or 2.5 hours or 3 hours. Was it a good 3 hours? That's a different question than the sort of like deep analysis, which is perfectly fine, but not what most viewers are doing.
And I'll even go one step, not so much as one step further. Ed, what you're saying, I agree. I don't think those things are mutually exclusive. I do think that
that's what I'm saying. They're not mutually exclusive.
That's what I'm getting at.
That's why I'm trying to make the point to you, Broclen. No offense to you.
I think what ends up happening is once people start saying, "Oh no, that's not good," and they start saying, "Oh, it's objectively bad," it's like, now you've made a mistake, because no art, without getting super duper into how deep what you do with your critiques, no art can be objectively good or bad. Like you have to start creating criteria for that, and you have to start talking it out. And you have to create, like, if we were in this audience right now, it was like, hey, I want to describe to you exactly why I can say all the Fast and Furious movies are objectively good. Once I make my own criteria for what the heck that means, you can't say I'm wrong because we're talking about art. But if we just say like, hey, did I have fun watching Fast and Furious? Yup, because I love those movies. I can also tell you, guess what? They ain't winning no Oscars. But
clearly a lot of people feel that way. What were you about to say something, Miss Pro Justice?
But I can also pull up movies that fit in the Fast and Furious ilk, which would win Oscars. Or like, to go to your example, Ed, like comic books. Yeah, more comic book movies should be winning Oscars. If we're talking about the zeitgeist of entertainment, of quality, of just objective critique of what hits like human, like emotion, all that sort of stuff. Yes, comic book movies can do that. Star Wars movies can do that. All these things can do that. That's not what all movies are. That's not what they're pumping out on purpose. Like that, the reason the Oscars exist is to highlight certain things, and those parts have been cut out long enough. I 100% agree, but we can't act like, if you just think about it, there's 52 weeks in a year, roughly 2 movies come out every year. That's being super duper conservative and limited. That means at least 100 movies come out every year. Of that 100, how many do you think are actually good? Like, that's just life. So then we need to start talking about, well, what raises things up above that level? Part of that is fandoms, part of that's how it's written. Like, it's a bunch of like minute things that add up to create that. But I don't want to start getting to that thing where it's like, no, we need to argue about this stuff being objectively good, because right now we're just talking about like entertainment value. If I'm spending a Sunday on my couch with my friends, what do we want to watch? Whether it is super prestige stuff like freaking The Tragedy of Macbeth, which is a great movie and is going to do Oscar-based stuff, or if we're about to sit and watch Ted Lasso for the next 6 hours, which is also really great, but it's not Better Call Saul. You know what I mean? Like, those things aren't mutually exclusive. They exist, but they all exist to do the same thing: entertain people. And that's what I'm here for. Are you entertaining me? Can you be diverse while you're doing it? Perfect. I'm in. Kick my feet up. Me and my dog are going to watch out and relax.
MPJ,
Ms. Pro Justice, did you want to introduce yourself and say hi? We're probably going to wrap it up in a little while, but I don't want to kill a good conversation while it's happening.
Shalom. Sorry, guys. I actually just wanted to ask you, Broclen. I left something in the comment because I'm gonna have to go to a memorial today. So I just wanted to ask you for some prayers, and thank you so much. May God bless you abundantly. Thank you guys for listening.
Thanks for coming.
Okay, yeah, I definitely saw your prayer there, and I think I'll pass it along to our Discord group. So thanks for stopping by.
Shalom.
Yeah.
But yeah, Ed and King Ping were like, no, seriously, I am 100% with just like I don't think Star Wars, they've been patting themselves on the back. And again, we've been picking on Star Wars a lot, but like a lot of these companies have been patting themselves on the back. Like, we are super duper diverse now. One, they're usually not. Two, yes, there have been diversity, but it's been in very, very specific windows of time. And we've talked about like, oh, people tend to be more accepting of specific characters being quote unquote Mary Sue's or OP or whatever you want to call it when they're secondary. Like everybody loves Jack Sparrow. He's a great character. He's a secondary character because he can do whatever the heck he wants. But that character doesn't work as the lead, so you got to flesh some other things out. It's not a complete apples to apples comparison, but I hope y'all can follow that one. Because the second we made Jack Sparrow the lead in anything, those movies suck. They didn't suck necessarily because of him. Those are just going to be bad movies regardless. But making a character that's already established as they can do whatever they want, the lead in anything, not good. That's where I kind of agree with some of the critiques of Rey and other characters like her. But I also disagree because those things are kind of baked into what those stories already were. It was a potentially overpowered, overqualified character, learning that they were overqualified and overprepared, but goes to a point that I was bringing up before. It's like we've also been watching this stuff for 40 years. I think in some cases, those creators were respecting that we know this stuff already. Like we can skip the true origins, can't we? Like the fact that I love the Hulk with Ed Norton in it because they put his origin story in the opening credits. I love She-Hulk because they're like, let's just make her origin story like a montage with her and Bruce. Like, except that we kind of know some of these machinations and allow them to tell the story a slightly different way. Sometimes it works, sometimes it don't. Not saying it's always 100% effective, but I do think this immediate knee-jerk reaction, like, hey, this is wrong because you're not telling it the exact same way, while also getting mad when they tell it the exact same way again, another place. Like, we gotta, goes back to what I was saying, like, fans typically don't really know what they want until we already have it. Like, let them tell us and then we reject it or accept it on the back end, but not because of some false pretenses, I guess is my point.
Someone who likes She-Hulk, that is a rarity. I haven't seen that in a hot minute.
Yeah, I think we said this earlier that there's a loud majority of people, and I think I've actually seen, Marvel memes can become a pretty divisive place sometimes, and I think they're actually relatively chill at the moment, but there is definitely like people who are enjoying She-Hulk, but no one screams angrily about the things they like. And I think that, we've all probably seen a lot of examples of how, anger can be a currency. So I'm not making a lot of noise as I sit there with my wife watching She-Hulk every week. But, some people are live tweeting their hatred. And one of those is much more noticeable.
I genuinely don't know.
I would comment on this. Yeah, I would comment on this.
So sorry. Let's do Cruel because he hasn't really said anything. Cruel, go ahead.
Yeah.
I was just saying, I genuinely don't know how you can actually sit down and watch that. Like, I really tried to get into it. I liked the comic book.
Well, and again, is this a discussion about whether or not it's good, which I've already clarified I have zero interest in? Or is it that you can't be entertained by it because it's just not for you? But like when we get into like, oh, I don't understand how you can like that. Okay, well, then you don't understand me. And this has very little to do with She-Hulk at all.
Arguably, I would think like the enjoyment and the quality go hand in hand. Like you have to have something good.
I've studied Shakespeare. Is that quality or not? I don't even know, man. Like I think that when we look at stuff on a historical level, especially, like what's good? Is it good or do we remember it?
And that's the point I was trying to bring up before. Like I enjoy She-Hulk. I think it's a funny, irreverent, silly show. That's what was advertised to me. The show that they are been showing on She-Hulk is exactly the show that I saw in the trailers. Like, oh, cool, this is what they're doing, and I'm on board for that. I also know a lot of people might not be on board for that. It goes to the point before, like they're doing more splintered stuff. Where it's like, hey, this might hit with a specific audience of women from the Northeast between 15 and 28 are going to love She-Hulk, and most people and other people might not. But I'm not going to say like, hey, if I didn't like She-Hulk, this show is bad. It's like, no, this show just ain't for me. Guess what? There's a bunch of shows that aren't for me that I don't watch and I will not give my time to. And I can absolutely still see why other people do like those shows. That's the point we were trying to get across.
Yeah, I mean, my biggest gripe about it is I have read the comics. I know what the comics are like. I've read them for a lot of years. So I get some of the parts that are just, I may find IRL a little bit weird, like the whole ass shaking thing. I was like, okay, well, yeah, it happens in the comics, but it's just a bit cringy to see on the screen. And some of the fucking CG, oh my God, that's where it breaks for me. Like, the story is give or take, the characters are meh, they're okay, but What hurts me is the fucking CG. That makes me want to burn my eyes
Okay,
out.
at what point are you harmed by it? Like this is where I really struggle when you're like, oh, it burned my eyes. I had to wash them with bleach. This experience was unbearable, and there's no way I can undo the trauma. How did we get there?
It's all very
You can turn it
personal,
off.
That's interesting. Yes. Because for me, I'll say something that totally derail us, and I know you're trying to get a couple other people in here, so I'll keep my comments short before we kind of peter to our close. But like, my favorite movie is Beetlejuice, and I don't care what you have to say about the quality, and I don't care what you have to say. This is a personal decision, and I made it when I was about 10. So it burns your eye out. I'm glad, I'm glad your eyes are burned out, if that's how you felt about Beetlejuice, which is the interesting thing about I'll use the word deconstruction since, we got to throw the word deconstruction in a Christian
We're required
theme,
to.
which is the concept of like deconstructing fandom, which is to say, I don't really care about the rest of you fans in my fandom. I really just care about my own enjoyment.
No, that's fair, but the difference is for me is like you bring up Beetlejuice, which I too adore that film. It's fantastic. But at the time when it come out, the actual quality of the work for the time it come out was really, really good. It's just looking better. It's looking worse rather with age. The actual quality of the CG that we have on She-Hulk is not good for its age. It is just not good in general. We've seen CG better in a lot lower budget films and other TV. That's where it hurts. I mean, as you said, I could just turn it off, of course, but seeing as I am a fan of the comics and all of that, I really want to get through it. It's just at some points, which is just, it's painful.
At some point, you're torturing yourself, man. Like,
Exactly.
if you're not enjoying it, that's you doing that to you. Intense Incense, what did you want to say?
The moment I was no longer being paid to watch The Walking Dead, I used to cover it for multiple sites. I used to go to New York Comic Con and camp out. Broclen and Jones in the Cut know my time doing this stuff. The moment nobody was paying me to watch anymore, I stopped watching. I had read all the compendiums. I was a huge Walking Dead fan. The show was not making me happy anymore. I was not entertained by it. And I stopped. And you know what? My life immediately got better. Food tasted better. The women I held were softer. The air was cleaner and crisper in my life. I'm just saying you could do the exact same thing and circle back around and be like, hey, let me give it a shot when it's kind of done, see how I feel. But if you're watching something and actively going, even if you're doing it for jokes, hyperbole, going, I want to burn out my eyes because the CGI on this multi-million-dollar show is not to my liking, yeah, that's on you at that point, man. You got to just
I get it. I am going to stop. I mean, I decided at the advent of the last episode, I'm fucking done with this. But I got to a point in which I really
want to try to rotate in our new speakers. I'm sorry for interrupting. And I'm going to ask you guys to keep yourselves on mute when you're not talking. And, I'm doing my best to keep a good conversation going here. But as we have more people on stage, we might have to shift into moderated mode, which is where everyone goes on mute. And we try to focus around a single question and then try to rotate and give folks an opportunity to answer that question. We are over our time, but we have a spirited discussion, and I don't want to kill it. Pastor Troy, how you doing? How are your lungs? How's your voice? I'm
all good over here. I was actually going to say I can't remember who was first, Sentient Gorilla or Intense Sense, but I know one of them should get the floor next.
Intense Incense, why don't you start us off, and then Sentient Gorilla, we're coming for you next.
Oh, thank you guys. No, I was wondering like about the whole Walking Dead as an example. I felt the same way. It just feels like a toxic relationship almost, because it's like it's a pity to stop because you started like 10, 12 years ago. So you want to keep watching, but it's like a torture because it's not interesting anymore and it's taking way too long. And like I wonder why we do that to ourselves.
Slight answer to that. That's a lot of what it is. It's fandoms, bringing it back to the topic, it's a lot of when you take things personally, a lot of what we do, especially in that space, and for lack of a better term, like nerddom, they're like, oh, I like this comic book, I like this movie because it speaks to me because when I was a nerd and I was picked on when I was 12, I had my friends and we made it through this way. And then when those things start to become more and more popular, become more ubiquitous, they feel like they're being taken away from us and made palatable to everyone else. How can all these normies, like Cruel, say, like this thing, this isn't the real thing that I was watching before, this is the watered down version. And then at a certain point, you have to realize, like, this is also just an adaptation. It's not a one-to-one recreation of the thing that adapted that I was watching. I'm also not that kid anymore. I'm watching it through a different lens. And it's hard to break yourself from that thing because it feels like you're breaking yourself from essentially a part of yourself. How can I dislike this thing that I said represented me? How can I I can make examples for other things. I don't buy Madden anymore for playing video games because Madden hasn't been good in well over a decade. But there was a time when I was still buying it. It's like, no, I cut my teeth playing Madden. That's how I met my friends. How can I not like this thing? You go out of it. The thing isn't as good anymore. It happens. And being able to healthily walk away from that stuff is hard, but very necessary. And a lot of people just can't do that because they're too wrapped up in it.
That's how I felt about the Power Rangers thing, that I feel like I was ready to enjoy the newest season of Power Rangers with my daughter because I haven't done it in 25 plus years. That's the kind of break I needed from what turns out to be a pretty formulaic show. But it's nicer. So Sentient Gorilla, are you with us? Would you like to add to the conversation, introduce yourself? Very stoic, very silent. All right, well, wait. And King Penguin, did you want to say something too? I know you were bumped off stage for a bit.
Yeah, I was booted for a bit. No, I was just, before I was booted, I was going to join in that conversation you guys were talking about shows that, have the larger majority talking smack about them. And I'm like, I'm in this boat as well, because with Rings of Power, I'm really enjoying it, especially like this third episode, which I've seen like everyone is just dumping on. And I'm like, but the show is pretty good. I'm liking the build up. I'm liking the story. I'm interested to see where it goes. And like, it's been so long since we visited Middle Earth. I'm like, I'm ready. I'm ready for this. But all the book readers are coming in. They're like, well, you see, it's not like this. And I'm like, I know it's not like that. And I know they can't make it like that. Can't we enjoy what they're trying to do right now?
There it is. I will say, and a lot of this, what you said, I agree with, but it's also a larger issue of perspective. With the way social media and the way we engage with not only each other, but with our media now, it's like, I'm going to watch it, but I'm also going to talk about it with this group of people that I'm already talking to. What ends up happening is, like you say, like, oh, there's a lot of people that say that are harshing on it and say they don't like it. Rings of Power is hard to say, but I know for House of the Dragon and other shows where the numbers are kind of more readily available to find out, millions upon millions of people are watching this stuff. You're probably hearing from like 20,000. And realistically, most of those millions and millions are just like, yeah, this is just fine. Something I'm watching on a Sunday night. Have no real opinions about it other than I like it. I'm going to keep watching it. But you're going to hear from other different ends of the spectrum, like Broclen was saying, mostly negative. They're like, you don't get attention for praising something anymore. Probably
the
not.
Reddit
It's
hive
sad.
mind is not a good sampling of the people of any particular viewership, I would say.
And I say this wholeheartedly. Ask your friends that aren't super into this stuff, or at least friends you don't think talk about it. Because odds are, if they watched either House of the Dragon, knowing how popular it is, the Rings of Power, like any of that stuff, ask them, what did you think? And just not even gauge the reactions, but listen to how they talk about it. It's like, oh yeah, that's pretty good. Yeah, I liked it. Me and my boyfriend might watch it again later. And that's as far as that conversation goes. They don't care about the Silmarillion. They don't care about when Sauron actually appeared and did anything. Like, they're like, no, I'm just watching a good show. Or an entertaining show if we don't want to get caught in that trap again. But they're just watching something that they enjoy. And it's like, not follow that lead, but like take that in. Like, that's what more often not what people are doing. And the people that are on the negative side of that spectrum, guess what they do? They just don't watch it again. You will never hear from those people because they're like, oh, I watched something I didn't enjoy, and then I went on about my day. There is a very specific contingent of people in fandom and in nerddom, because that's how we operate. Because like, not only did I not like this, I need to tell as many people as I can that I didn't like this in as specific a way as possible so that I can get attention for it. That's where you get super duper angry hate takes. And I don't like that as engagement, because like, I don't know anything about you other than you don't like stuff.
Well, and I feel like that's where it becomes like an anti-fandom, right? That like you're, in a general sense, you're sort of like trying to be excited and pull other potentially new people into your excitement. But when you dislike it and you are still a part of that fandom, you're basically telling people, well, in order to love this, you must hate that. And I think that's just a really awkward position for, I generally think of fandoms of being in enjoyment, if not in favor of the media in general.
Personal thing I've done for my own online health as I've navigated these Twitter and TikTok and everything streets as I've tried to do my business. Any people that I know more about the stuff that they dislike, that they aren't getting paid to tell me they dislike it, I immediately stop taking their opinion seriously. Because like you can stop watching this and start watching something that you want to praise and tell other people about, like, oh, if you like this show that I don't think is good, here's something that I think is better that fits in that same mold. But they never do that. They are just strictly telling me how much they hate this thing that they continue to give money to that they claim they don't like. And I'm like, do you know what the definition of insanity is? Like, this is either you're doing it for the attention or you're literally unable to break yourself from it. And as I was just saying, like, we know that's all hard, but they've turned it into their positive. The negative attention is their positive. And it's like, I can't.
Negative attention gets clicks, gets shares, generates ad revenue.
And again, and if you're not actually getting ad revenue, if you're just some person on the internet telling me how much everything sucks while you don't get paid to do that, what am I supposed to do with that information?
This kind of puts it into perspective for me, because if you guys would like think back to like 20 years ago, being a nerd was like the worst thing you could ever do. You weren't allowed to share your love or your passion for a certain show or movie you liked. And then now here we are in a world where the nerds rule, just being able to share like how we are in this server.
We run everything and none of us are happy.
Exactly. And that's the thing, is that now we are in a position of power and we've let it get to our heads where we're now gatekeeping the very people who made fun of us for enjoying our shows and movies. Now we're gatekeeping them. We're like, hey, by the way, now you're in this. I just want to tell you, I hate this thing with a passion and you're not allowed to like it. We're going to do it my way now. It's so funny.
Exactly.
Hey, this is Sentient Gorilla. I was wondering if I could just add on something real quickly here.
Yeah, please. I was just about to call on you.
Oh, thanks. I appreciate it. Sorry about that. I don't know how to. I don't know how to internet sometimes. So, but here I am. Yeah, this is. I'm really glad to talk to you guys. I've been a lurker in the Reddit for a while. I also like to lurk on Christianity as well. This is a great topic that everyone's talking about today, and I'd really love an opportunity to add my 2 cents. I'll keep it quick and short because I'm actually in the middle of work. I'm a dog walker in New York City, and it's raining today. But I wanted to
be careful.
Yeah, I will be. Thank you. By the grace of God, go I. But I was gonna say that I was having this conversation about fandom and stuff. Albeit not so politely as you guys are having it here today with my gaming group. And a large portion of us happen to be Christian, but the majority are strong conservative Christians. I'm more in the middle. And when it comes to things like Rings of Power and basically any fandom that you have these days, everybody is totally right. It's a lot of the rage and shouting that you're hearing is coming from the loud minority. And but I one of the guys in my gaming group, he's a really, really close friend of mine. Actually, about 2 years ago, I asked him to baptize me, and he did. I flew down to Arizona, and we got a bunch of our gaming friends together, and he baptized me because I asked him to.
Congratulations!
Thank you so much. And he's a really close friend of mine, but he really loves Lord of the Rings, and he feels absolutely like betrayed, and he's upset, and he's like how could they do this? Like those AHs, you don't have to, it's those a-holes over at Amazon, they knew what they were doing, and he's so mad. And I'm like, look, dude, just to tell you guys something about me, I'm a huge Star Wars fan. And in 2014, when they gutted the expanded universe canon, I was gutted. I was so upset. I was hurt. I was like, how could they do this? That's
there
not
we
fair.
have it again.
This is mine.
Gutted.
Yeah.
That there's like a physical attack people report feeling when their fandom is not being treated as they say. It's interesting.
And I wanted to tell him so 6-7 years out from the 2014 Star Wars EU Thanos snap. That's what I like to refer to it as, the Thanos snap of Star Wars. About 6 or 7 years out from that, I have a different perspective, and that perspective is, look, you can still like Star Wars, Sentient Gorilla, but it's not yours. Like, as much as you want to be like, this is who I am, this is my blood, every generation of kids that comes into fandom and enjoys this stuff, it's not yours, it doesn't belong to you, it belongs to the community. And I have a different perspective of it now, which I feel like is a lot more healthier. And I told my friend, I said, look, at the end of the day, you are allowed to not like it. You are allowed to be upset, and you're allowed to have your opinions. I said, but be careful that you don't lash out at the people around you that like this stuff. Don't make it a weapon against people.
Don't yuck on somebody else's yums. Come on, people.
Yeah, then just you're allowed to not like it. No, you're not racist for not liking it. I just think I need to say that real quick. If you don't like it, you're not racist. Let's get rid of that whole aspect, because people are really upset and they're really defensive, and people are, people are projecting other things on other people's opinions and saying, oh, you think I'm racist, or oh, you're racist. Like, let's just get rid of that, because that's not necessary, and you're allowed to not like it, but don't let your bitterness and your sharpness in your opinion cut the people around you. That don't let it burn bridges that you're not trying to burn. And that's all I have to say. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you for
Thanks
that.
for popping by.
Yeah, no, I'm with that 100%. And to what you're saying, like, you can like it and not be racist. I agree. I think the trap that people fall into is they start parroting the dislike for people that are clearly racist and saying the same things that they're saying. It's like, whoa, you don't want to follow behind that group, man. They're talking about some other stuff over
Yeah,
there.
in this Star Wars verse, there's definitely people out there who want to tell you that Star Wars is racist against white people, and like there's people out there pushing some narrative. So I don't want to say that isn't true, but yeah, like that's not when you're talking with your friends, that's probably not what's going on.
Probably not what's happening.
Hopefully not.
I'd like to add a little something to that as well. I think I'll just say this, especially to the comments about She-Hulk earlier, another one that I haven't watched yet, the comments that were just made about, Star Wars and all these different things. What's interesting is we keep talking about what people are saying and what we hear. And that's such a curated experience. And I think sometimes we touched on that a little bit earlier. We've touched on it a couple times, like, the Reddit
folks
community
do not equal truth.
Right. And so my timeline on Twitter doesn't have a problem with She-Hulk at all. So it's funny the only way I know that people have an issue with it is probably because of some media outlet that has decided to seize in on some tweets or whatever the case may be and turn that into a story. And then now I can see that there is some subset of Twitter or wherever else that doesn't like it. But honestly, in my own personal life, I have not heard that one time. So I just want to throw that out there kind of more generally for a lot of this conversation, is that we always have to remember that what we hear, especially in this day and age, and certainly on social media, I think we've all seen the Social Dilemma documentary, and we all just kind of have common sense, right? Like, we curate what we hear, and we also curate what we watch, and we need to be mindful of that.
There was an example of that. It didn't quite backfire, but it didn't go the way that was planned. So I'm sure everyone, not everyone else assume. So Chris Pratt, Guardians of the Galaxy fame, he's well known as a right-winger, very devout Christian guy. But people have been using that.
I did not know that. I am not in the loop on this. Thank you for it. I had no idea.
It's one of those known things that he's kind of leaned into, but not like the super negative aspects of it, because he's still got that Marvel bag. He's not trying to fumble. But what happened was he has this new show on Amazon Prime that's very much like a very right-leaning conservative. It's like Yellowstone, but with Marines. Like Yellowstone, another show I love. But there was a whole bunch of, you could tell, pre-written stuff about the backlash to the show, like woke critics don't like this show and all these left-wing people don't like it. And here's the thing. None of the reviews that were negative about the show, most of the reviews were like meh to positive. It was like, oh, it's just a fine like military procedural that's on Amazon Prime, well done, good action, etc. But they were already expecting some sort of left-leaning, anti-right like pushback against it. That never happened. So all these pieces started coming up. It was like, yeah, the right or the left didn't like the show, but it got this many millions of views and all this sort of stuff. And everybody's just like, dude, we watched it and we liked it too. We didn't dislike it for any of those reasons. And that was the echo chamber. It's like, see, they were trying to weaponize the bad faith stuff. It's like, you can see it happening. and it falls through the cracks immediately. But like people are acting on because they know that they can get people to react that way, and it's fascinating to watch happen in real time.
I think we're coming to the end of our time, so I think I want to put a final question out there, and then once we've hashed that out a bit, we'll get everyone an opportunity to share their final word or plug a project or whatever. All right, so here's my last question: can a social media be a sort of fandom? I know that a lot of people, they live their life on Twitter. I live my life on Reddit, and sometimes I feel like, maybe I'm not always a happy fan, but I guess if I spend enough time here, I am. I'm old enough to remember when Facebook was just becoming like a mainstream thing, and there were a lot of people that had like quite a relationship with Facebook. So, can social networks be fandoms of their own, or are they something different? That's the question I'm tossing out here.
My quick answer is yes. It's in very odd ways. It's a lot of basically how you want to experience your interaction. Do you want to be more front facing? Do you want to be more back and forth? Do you want to just kind of let things wash over you, like et cetera, et cetera? I know my preferred social media place to just kind of nest and hang out is Twitter. Basically just a running forum with a lot of, I've kind of curated mine, so it's a lot of people just getting jokes off and like news and information kind of coming in, but like basically reacting to it that way. But I also know I get called an old for still interacting with Twitter. I know I get called an old for not having a TikTok, like just random stuff like that. And people have drawn their battle lines for where they want to interact because that's how it works for them. But that's largely what it is. It's like, here's where my ecosystem of relationships is. Yours is clearly the wrong one. Even if you say, hey, I have both. They're like, no, you still got to pick a side. Like, even as me, adult male with disposable income with every gaming console you could possibly want, I get called a Sony pony or an Xbox, depending on who I'm talking to, even though I have buttons.
Really? Still? Yeah, we're still having console wars?
So that's just the thing that people do. They draw their battle lines over arbitrary reasons, and social media can definitely be one of those places. So that's been my experience.
Sega for the win.
All right. Does anyone else want to weigh in on this question?
No, I just kind of agree.
Yeah,
we'll hit you next, King Penguin.
It definitely kind of is a fandom. Obviously, like you say, it's a matter of how you kind of want to consume it. My preference is Reddit. I have done Facebook. I have done Twitter, and I've deleted both. Christ, I go all the way back to oh god, internet's going to make fun of me. The fucking MySpace, and even before that, Bevo of all things. So yeah, I guess I'm an old. But no, it's just a matter of how you kind of want to digest your social media, and it can kind of become a fandom of its own because there is obviously divisions there, and things you can follow, which is a fandom of its own. But yeah, it definitely kind of, I think it places itself quite firmly in there because there is division between it. So yeah, that's my standing on it.
I will say, much like any fandom, especially if you get deep into it with like your echo chambers and the people you talk to about it, you can tell how far off the reservation you might actually be when you try to replicate those conversations with other people. Because I've tried to bring up Twitter topics to the people that don't really do Twitter, and I sound insane. I do the same thing when I talk about fandom stuff. It's like, oh, people are all upset about this thing about Spider-Man No Way Home, and like they cut out the version where you could see him kicking the lizard at the bottom, and people look at me like, what the hell are you talking about? And I'm like, oh, I'm crazy. This isn't a real problem. Why am I talking to this person about it? And so just kind of, it always levels me. It gives me some more perspective. It's like, oh yeah, this is an online problem, quote unquote. This is not what real people care about in this stuff at all.
No, at that point, you're providing your own echo chamber.
I relate.
Hey,
I have
Penguin,
been in
you
those
want to share with us?
Who, me?
Yeah, I'm calling on you. Now's your moment.
All right, yeah, no, I was saying I relate to that, where I've like tried to have real conversations with, not real, sorry, like I've tried to have conversations about the internet in real life, and people look at me like, bro, you good? So I've been in that situation before. But back to the social media question, I do definitely think that social media can be a fandom, especially like with the whole lines in the sand thing, because I'm one of those people as well. I refuse to have a TikTok or a Twitter account because I'm like, that's just some toxicity I don't need in my life. I live on YouTube, and I'm really warming up to Reddit. I got Reddit like fairly recently. I've not been in it for years. So I would say those would be my two main places where I like hanging out.
Sentient Gorilla, did you want to weigh in on this? Is he asleep? Oh, no, there he is.
No, I'm not asleep. I am outside. So if you hear the streets of New York and
Right, dog walking. Yeah,
dog
right.
walking.
Hey, I'm walking here.
Nice one. Yeah. So, sorry, this is gonna sound stupid. Can you remind me what the original question was?
The question is about whether or not, or to what extent, social medias can be sorts of fandoms themselves. And I think we sort of talked about how echo chambers and fandoms can sort of function in similar and potentially toxic ways.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I feel like the last 20 years, the internet has really pumped buckets of steroids into nerd fandom, 100%, for good and for ill. Yeah, I mean, I don't really have much to say than that. I mean, I think that's pretty obvious, though. I feel like I don't think I'm saying anything that anybody here doesn't already know. And
that's so humble. You don't get that a lot in internet discords, where everyone seems to think their idea is new and fresh and edgy, and you're like, you know what, maybe it's just my opinion.
That's very nice of you to say. Am I speaking to Broclen right now?
Yes, I am Broclen.
Oh, okay. Oh, Broclen. Cool. Rock and roll. Yeah, you know, when it comes to, like, if I'm going to expand on my thought, when it comes to our fandom and how we interact with it using social media, I think it's very unpopular of an opinion to suggest that we have a responsibility to moderate ourselves and to act like adults. And I know that's like a very not something people are willing to do on social media a whole lot. Present company excluded, of course.
I just fainted in my chair.
Present company excluded. But it's, you know, we have a responsibility as, you know, people who have brains and have mouths and have hearts and have a keyboard, you know, to not just spout something that's, you know, going to trigger someone to be hateful. There's a lot of crap out there. There's a lot of evil energy, and I hesitate to use the word evil powers, but there's a lot of evil powers out there, so I'm going to use it anyway. And the truth is that, you know, it compels people to act on what they feel like is an attack on their identities. And, you know, we've seen the repercussions, especially in the USA. And, you know, we need to look, it's fine.
Would you say we need to de-escalate ourselves sometimes?
It's
that we need to bring it down a notch here and there.
Yes, but with the caveat that you're allowed to not like something. That's fine. No one's saying that, oh, you're telling me I can't voice my opinion about liking this. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm trying to tell you is that, like you said, Broclen, de-escalate just a little bit. Like, you're allowed to have your opinion, but don't let your opinion hurt somebody. That's all I got.
All right, Nun Tribe, do you want to weigh in? Again, I'm just going to bring it back to the question of to what extent social media acts as a fandom of its own.
Yes. Yes. So, first thing, Castor Troy said earlier about talking to people outside of it. I suggest to everyone in here to talk to someone who is sort of not on the internet. So, like,
talk to real people in your real life. It's a good idea.
Not just real people, but like literally older people. And I know you don't like everything they're saying, but sometimes it's just good to do that insanity check of like, wait a minute, no one does know about this, right? So, like, find a 50-year-old or a 60-year-old sometimes. But anyway, to your question, yes, it definitely can function that way. I think it's probably a bit of a undersold question because it's I don't even know. I put it this way. I mean, I feel like it's that whole wagging the dog thing going on. So I don't even know sometimes whether I want to scroll on my Twitter timeline or even want to come on to Reddit, but I just do it anyways. And so just to say that it's something that I like and enjoy is almost an understatement. I do like and enjoy it, but I'm here, I know, because I'm being honest with myself, because I am addicted to it. And I think we're all lying to ourselves if we're trying to pretend that we don't also have some mild addiction to these things. So those mild or even severe. So the thought process that we're here because we just like it, or we go to certain ones just because we like them, or whatever the case may be, is certainly true, but it certainly isn't the only truth. So that's my only comment on that. It's that both of those things are happening at the same time. Yes, I like scrolling through my Twitter timeline. Yes, Twitter also told me to do so from inside of my brain. So both of those things are true at the same time.
That's a very honest view. Jones in the cut, did you want to weigh in? Have we lost you?
I don't know if I have. Social media is just it's too hard for me to consistently engage in. So I don't know if I have.
I've seen you watch some YouTubes. That's social media still.
Yeah,
I'll hit you with the.
No. You're right on that. I guess I am a worker, so more than like a common engager, but also kind of for that same thing. I very rarely find conversations worth engaging in through YouTube. Reddit has been a little different. I definitely given up on Twitter, but yeah, especially by the time I watch videos, like people have been commenting already, and it doesn't seem worth it. I'd rather actually talk to someone in person about it. But yeah, I do watch a lot of YouTube, so there's that. It is an addictive quality to it. There were some videos that I still like. I kind of miss now that I don't watch anymore. Some people I used to watch them at the same time every day, and then now it's like now that I don't, sometimes like, oh yeah, I kind of miss that. So going to I believe what Non-Tribe was saying, that there's that addictive quality to it. Yeah, I don't really have anything else. That's that.
I forgot that YouTube has its own sort of being a YouTube influencer is a thing, and I think it's for most people a very short-lived thing. But there's definitely like a sub fandom component to that.
There was one YouTuber that I really got into because he was covering the Johnny Depp Amber Heard case, and everything that he put out was hilarious during that time period. So like I follow him sometimes now, but not so much. It was more about like in that moment, that particular thing that I found really entertaining. So maybe my kind of like kind of spreads to that. Just like it doesn't really matter the platform. It's kind of like looking for specific things.
Cruel Angel, did we start with you on this, or have we not come to you yet? I lost track in my little brain.
I mean, I've been around. I went second, I think.
Yeah, no, it was me, then him. So I think, I think we might have hit everybody.
All right. So, we're coming up on the end here, but the last thing I want to do is just like give each of you guys the floor for a moment so you can either, if you've got a project you want to plug, now's your time to plug it and drop a link in the comments. Or if you just have a final thought you want to share, now's your time, and then I'll read our outro info, and Olive Tiger will play us out. So why don't we start with, why don't we come back to Cruel Angel, because you were one of the first ones before.
Oh, damn. I'll be honest, I'm kind of on the spot. I don't really know what to say.
Sorry, I hit you too fast. We can come back.
No, it's cool. I mean, the moment you said that, I was like, okay, I got to think of something here. And I'm just like, shit.
I could sense your fear. That's why I called on you. I'm sorry. I didn't control that superpower that I have.
You got me. I got nothing really to plug. Not that I've plugged already. music and stuff coming out soon. Eventually, I'll put links, but that's probably not going to be for the next few weeks or so. Still in the studio trying to finish stuff. So
Well, whenever
that's
you
kind
have
of-
links, we're happy to receive your links.
Okay, I will say though, just for those that may be interested and those that probably aren't, I expect the majority aren't. My music's pretty heavy. I mean, those into like Suicide Silence may like my band stuff. So,
I mean, Olive Tiger is relatively heavy, especially our outro music here.
Really?
Well, it's all instrumental, but I know the depth of her work a bit more, and it tends to be pretty, emotionally evocative.
Yeah, ours is far more angry.
Well, whenever you feel ready to share, we can, if you want, we can feature it, or you can just drop in links. So
I may just drop a link or something, but like I feel like after you hear my stuff, you might look at me a different way because it's out there.
All right.
Okay.
So I think I'm going to pass it to Intense Incense. I don't know if you were here, but this is just everyone's final thoughts. And if you have a project you want to plug, now would be a perfect time to do that.
Oh no, you guys, like my story is depressed. Like the only hobby I really like is like drawing at this point because gaming fell off like a few years ago and I can't even find the motivation to do that. So, and everybody keeps saying my art is really good and I'm the only one that does not see it. So that doesn't help, when there's like no trust in yourself, basically.
Oof, yeah, no, that's tough, but I feel like a lot of artists struggle with that.
To be fair, her art is fucking incredible. Like,
Aw.
unbelievably good.
Thank you.
Anytime.
I'm sorry I didn't run my background check on you before I brought you on stage, so I'll have to check it out
It's
myself.
okay. I don't have anything posted, but we are friends, like Crow and I, so he has seen my art. Yeah.
Aha, a friend of the show. Okay, well, thanks for being here. King Penguin, did you want to say anything before we walk out the door?
Definitely enjoyed this. Really, I enjoyed this call. Cool. And yes, as a shameless self-plug, I have two YouTube channels. One which I talk movies, and one which I do comedy skits on, or at least try to do comedy skits. If I'm funny, that's debatable to you guys.
Art and comedy are both a bit subjective, so yeah, drop those links so people can check them out.
Alrighty then.
Sentient Gorilla, did we give you a chance to say your final thought before we head out the door?
I didn't have anything much more as far as final thoughts than what I've already said, but and I don't really have anything to plug, but I will say that I do. But my gaming group that I was actually talking about, I run a guild on the Star Wars MMO called Star Wars: The Old Republic, and if you're ever on the Satilshan server, send Avon Redwind an in-game mail, and I'd be happy to play with you guys. I founded the guild, and well, no, I didn't found the guild. I'm a co-founder, but I do that for fun, and that's pretty much it. I'm very happy to have had the opportunity to be a part of this talk today. This has never happened to me before. This was a whim, and this is a really great community. Thanks for welcoming me and letting me be a part of it.
And thanks for taking us through New York City. I feel like you have an extra leash with just a floating phone on it, and that's us traveling with you.
It's a Reddit alien. I'm walking a Reddit alien that no one else can see but you guys.
Oh, how this is the metaverse come to life.
I think it's called a snoo. Is that right?
Yes, it's called a snoo.
Cool. Hey, Broclen, send me a message in Reddit when you have some time. I'd love to chat with you after the show, if that's cool with you.
Sure. Yeah, I'll try to find you.
Can I get some Death by Snoo Snoo?
Death by Snoo Snoo, Futurama.
Oh, yeah.
Who haven't we talked to yet? Jones in the Cut, do you want to share your final thoughts or plug a project or whatever's going on with you?
No, just enjoyed our talk today. These are becoming a weekly thing to look forward to on my Sundays. So thank you. Thank you for all the new people. It was great hearing from you, and hope to see you guys again next week.
Yeah, thanks for being a regular. We have to get you a punch card. So, like on every 12th little podcast, you get a sub or something. There should be a reward system. We'll work on this.
Definitely a sandwich.
Speaking of punch cards, I'm going to toss it to you next, Caster, but you're actually going to be joining us for our next recording. Is that right?
That is correct. I wasn't sure if you're going to bring it up now, right now or not, but yeah, I will be on Wednesday. That's the only real thing I have to plug. So if you want to hear my dulcet tones speaking again about random things that I know, do we talk about the topic now, Broclen, or do you want to keep that close to the vest? How do you operate with that?
Yeah, if you want to make that your plug, and then I can just wind down the show when you're done.
So I will be on with Broclen doing a kind of a Q&A back and forth about basically the representation of gods and religion in popular media. More recent stuff. So we were talking about like MCU, basically all the stuff we talked about today, but how those things are speaking about and to religion and how audiences are kind of reacting to them and how we interpret that and how changing cultural norms and mores have affected how companies are now talking about religion, because things have flipped upside down a little bit from how they used to treat these things in the past. So if you want to hear me talk about that again, I'll be on Wednesday. And if you care about just written such things, my blogs and stuff will be starting to be active again. I'm reinvigorating those fires, popping back up over the next coming months and weeks. Find me on Twitter at @thearnold_SOM. I don't know, I'll put that in the chat probably. But yeah, that's it.
Thank you so much for doing my job for me. This has been the Dank Christian Memes podcast. Our music is from the Great Olive Tiger. Our recording sessions happen Sundays at 3 p.m. Eastern Time and Wednesdays at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. Dank Christian Memes is a place for all kinds of Christians and all kinds of non-Christians, and it's also a place for silly memes if you're into that sort of thing. If you would like to connect with our community further, there's a link to our Discord in the comments section. Thank you for listening, and until next time, may the memes bless you and keep you.